Invitational qualifying series, and what better place to head to decide who will make it into the top 20 and score themselves a place in our main Supercars Pro Invitational Series than the holy grail of Australian motorsport, Mount Panorama Bathurst. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lockie Mansell, your host commentator this evening. Joining me in the commentary box to talk everyone through all of the action tonight. It's a very good evening. Firstly to Steve Sandman Clark. How are you going tonight, Sandman?
Good, Lockie. Absolutely pumped for this Mount Panorama Bathurst. It doesn't get much better than this, does it? We love coming here for endurance races, but this time it's a whole new board game. It's a sprint round, and the pressure's on for these guys to make the top 20.
It sure is. We'll go through the points very shortly. Before we do, though, time to introduce the other man in our trio of commentators tonight. You'll be seeing him on track when the Supercars Pro Invitational Series gets underway, because he finished well and truly inside the top 20 in last year's series, earning himself automatic qualification and not having to participate in the qualifying series. But he's pretty handy behind the microphone as well. It's a very good evening to Jake Burton. How are you going tonight, Jake?
Yeah, good, mate. Very, very good. I'm excited for this one because as much as I did qualify in the top 20, as you mentioned, I'm very thankful to have, because I don't have to deal with how competitive this race is looking like it's going to be. This is going to go down to the wire. I think we've got a few cars floating around that top 20 who really, really need to make a good night of themselves to get in.
Yeah, we certainly do. There's some big names that are under pressure tonight. There's some drivers at the lower end of the top 20 who will be desperate to make sure that they don't have a bad result tonight. There's some other drivers who are outside the top 20 who will desperate to have a good result to vault themselves inside that critical top 20. We'll run through all of the permutations and combinations very soon. Qualifying not too far away, and as per usual, it will be a split session of upper and lower 50% drivers. But we've got a special guest in the commentary box tonight, and it's someone who's doing a lot of very proactive work behind the scenes when it comes to the online esports scene in Australia. It's a very good evening to Shub Agarwal, who is the esports E-Series Sim Racing Coordinator for Motorsports Australia. How are you going, Shub?
G'day, Lockie. Thanks for having me. Hey, Jake and Sandman, if I can call you that.
Yeah, absolutely. How are you, Shub? Nice of you to join us.
No, thanks for having me. It's exciting to be here, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
So, I'm interested to know, obviously, if we cast our mind back to March 2020, when the Australian Grand Prix was cancelled, COVID-19 became a reality, we were all locked in our houses for 3 months, and all of a sudden the sim racing scene exploded in popularity. We had sim racing events and championships taking place every night of the week. Some of the top real-life racing drivers here in Australia, including pretty much the entire Supercars Championship grid, competing not just against one another, but competing against some of the best talents from all over the world. And it was sort of the arrival, I think we can say, of sim racing as a legitimate sport, and not only that, but a legitimate pathway to real-life motorsport. So, Shub, what have you guys at Motorsport Australia been doing to continue the momentum that the sim racing world gained back in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, you've almost just stolen my script from your first sentence there, is that, it all really came from COVID. So, even though I guess we see sim speed or sim racing started much before, as you said, the emergence really came through from people being stuck at home. And we recognized that people were switching to sim racing and esports. And, it's hard for an organization to, make that split and decide, look, we need to invest in the space a bit more. But, support of our board and our CEO, we were obviously able to resource and provide some support in esports. And we've really come in, and last year has been a lot of just us learning about the space, because we've been, as you're aware, traditional racing, and it's very different from sim racing and esports. So I think last year was just us really learning the space and seeing if there was an opportunity for us to even provide support, and if we can, how do we do so? And obviously we've come back with some hopefully good ideas, and we want to try and implement that for 2023 and beyond.
What are some of the ideas that you've come up with for how you might be able to provide some support?
Yeah, it's a good question. And obviously, it's still building as we grow. I think the idea is that we want to try and provide support across the entire space. So that's promoters to competitors to spectators. So that's us coming in, and what we've learned is it's providing more recognition for the sport more than anything. So, they don't necessarily want us to come in and run events because there are heaps of event organizers, but, really give promoters and competitors the opportunity to, move on to the next level or, host the best drivers in the world. So we try to really push that narrative. The idea, or I guess what we want to do for 2023 is pretty much replicate what we're doing with real life racing, is have promoters run national championships for us. So we put out an expression of interest a couple of weeks ago, and we actually closed them on Friday last week, and we received some fantastic response from organisers and promoters who are looking forward to potentially running events across various platforms and games. And iRacing's been one of them, and which is the most famous one, but we've got Assetto Corsa Competizione, and Gran Turismo as well. So the plan is to really, I guess, leverage these promoters, have them run national championships, and also provide a space for community events, Asia Pacific event qualifiers, which we did last year, and the Asia and even the FI Motorsport Games.
Have you been surprised about how the product that we all try to put forward, we obviously try to put their best foot forward with our broadcast and our racing and our stewards and everything. Has that surprised you how much actually goes into the world of esports?
Yeah, 100%. And, being someone that wasn't part of esports initially, when I first got invited to a session like this one, I did not know that officials existed in esports. Or, if, I knew commentators were there, but the amount of work that goes through in the back end of organisers and putting everything together, from broadcast to commentators to, protests, it's really running an actual event, just a real life event, but you're just doing it all across a few hours, which just makes it harder. So yeah, it's definitely appreciated how much work goes into running or putting together an event like this.
So one of the things that I'm interested to get your opinion on as well, Shub, so we've got Jake Burton as part of our commentary team tonight, obviously, but you'll be seeing him competing in the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Series. He's also had lots of experience and success in real life racing, and I think increasingly with the improvement in sim racing technology, particularly with motion simulators and that sort of thing, sim racing is becoming more and more established as a legitimate pathway to real-life motorsport. So is that something that you're looking at as providing a pathway for more drivers to come out of the sim racing world into real-life competition?
Absolutely, yes, it is. It is definitely an avenue we're looking at, and we want to be able to provide young and upcoming drivers the opportunity to train at a low risk area, and potentially move on to traditional racing. In saying that, we do want to recognise the fact that this is a legitimate sport. So we don't want to take away from this being an opportunity to move ahead to traditional racing, but treating this as what it is esports, and you've got to have particular skills, and it requires training and practice. So we obviously understand that, and it is definitely a good way for us to get officials in the door as well. Most professional officials, the core of the business and what they do is really, really why we exist. This is a fantastic way to get them involved as well. It involves, I guess, lesser time commitment. It's lower risk, but it teaches you the same thing. So we're really focusing on that area as well.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's as a driver or as an official, the consequences of making mistakes in the virtual world are a lot less significant than they are in real life. You can crash as hard and as often as you like in sim racing, and you're not going to hurt yourself or tear up hundreds of thousands of dollars in damage repair bills. And equally, if you're an official in the sim racing world, you can get away with probably making some judgmental errors, and it's not going to have the same sorts of consequences that those mistakes might have in real life from a safety perspective. Yeah,
absolutely. And that doesn't take away from the fact that you want to still not treat it as a practice, but also treat it as a way you can develop in this space. Short answer, yes.
I'm very excited though when you talk about the fact that you've welcomed expressions of interest from series promoters to run Motorsport Australia Section A series. I'm very curious to see what they might be, because obviously, you know, just taking the iRacing platform as an example, there are lots of cars and circuits available on the iRacing platform that directly relatable to the sorts of cars that we race here in Australia, not just supercars, but Formula V, TCR cars, you know, Porsche Carrera Cup cars as well.
Yeah, we've obviously, like I said, we've got some fantastic response, and as you're probably aware, it is an extremely competitive space. So yeah, look, we're trying to hopefully get our heads together and trying to decide who we want to go ahead with, and why not for someone else. So we're hoping to release a bit of a formal introduction to our promoters within the next few weeks.
Jake, did you have any questions for Shub? Obviously, as somebody who competes across both the virtual and real life disciplines.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that's pretty exciting, you sort of touched on it before, Lockie, is the opportunity to give sim racers the opportunity to race in real life cars. Obviously, I've been lucky enough to have that opportunity, and I really appreciated how Shub there, allowed sim racing to stand alone. You know, there's definitely competitive opportunities. So I guess I'm as excited as you are to just see what future opportunities there are. And I want to know Shub's thoughts on the Logitech G Pro Invitational Series. Did you watch it last year? You know, what kind of racing did you enjoy and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's definitely been one of the hype events of the year, and especially last year was definitely a fairly successful event in Australia. I'd be surprised if anyone in this industry said they didn't know of this event. So it was obviously run extremely well. The guys at Racestar TV do a fantastic job, and all of you do an amazing job in broadcasting the event. So it's always going to be the top tier events in Australia going forward anyway.
And do you think, it's something I've just thought of actually, obviously a lot of sim racing events are based off real life events, and a lot of the rules and decision making and stewarding and whatnot is probably largely based off a rhetoric set by Motorsport Australia and other, series runners and that sort of thing. Do you think you guys can learn anything from sim racing that perhaps could be applied to some real life motorsport?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm sure there is, and absolutely the way that we're able to use technology in sim racing is, I guess, helpful to officials. The same way we could potentially use technology to help us in traditional racing. Look, I think that obviously the more we grow and the more I learn about this space, the more we can take away and implement. But I'm sure there are multiple, not just one, ways of us to improve how we can do things at the actual track.
Awesome. Well, I'm very thankful as a sim racing competitor that we have your support. It's awesome to have such an established regulator in terms of motorsport backing sim racing.
No, and thank you. And look, I must say that it's been really fantastic just receiving support from everyone. So when we started last year, just consultation, everyone we spoke to was super helpful and was happy to teach us and basically just hold us across the way. So we've been really grateful to have a community that's really welcoming, and it's just exciting for us to be here.
Very good, yeah. It's obviously very exciting times ahead, and again, I'm curious to see some of those series that might be in the pipeline. I think there's some, I get the feeling that there might be some big announcements in the not too distant future, so I reckon that we all need to stay tuned for what those might entail.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, Shub, thank you very much for joining us as part of the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series broadcast tonight. I think you're going to be given the tour of the whole operations department. You're going to actually go and have a look at race control and see what happens there, and get a full understanding of all of the processes and procedures that go into running an event like this. So I hope you enjoy yourself tonight.
Thank you, and thanks for having me, and hope you have a good event ahead, and good evening to all of you.
Thank you. Have a good night. There is Shub Agarwal, the esports sim racing coordinator for Motorsport Australia. And gentlemen, I think as we reflect on some of the news that Shub relayed to us, I think probably the exciting takeaway there is the fact that Motorsport Australia are actually looking at sanctioning some E-Series championships and getting promoters in to promote those series. So exciting times ahead.
It's great, isn't it, Lockie, when you think about the impact that Motorsport Australia's have, and to know that they're listening for our sport is terrific. And mate, the implications that could roll on from this in the coming years is fairly exciting. So, you know, I think it's probably the best time to be involved in sim racing right now, or esports. And whether you're a competitor or whether you're behind the scenes putting championships together in broadcasting, whatever it might be, it's pretty exciting times, I think, from Motorsport Australia. And I'm looking forward to any future announcements that might be coming.
That's the future, but let's now turn our attention back to the present, because we have a qualifying session underway. In fact, the first segment of qualifying is just about complete here at Mount Panorama. We were so intrigued by what Shub was telling us that pretty much this first half of the session has just about run its course. And at the moment, Hayden Veld is the man on top of the timesheets. Now, the critical thing tonight, you need to finish tonight in the top 20 in the standings to buy yourself a ticket to compete in the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational. So, drivers on the bubble. I reckon that anyone from 16th position down to 20th is vulnerable, because there's only, let's have a look, 28 points from 16th to 20th position. And conversely, there are some drivers outside the top 20, and I'm looking particularly at names like Josh Muggleton, who are very capable of moving themselves inside that top 20. How is the pressure going to be for these drivers tonight?
The pressure's on for Josh Muggleton at the moment, by the way. It's good that you brought him up, because it is the end of qualifying. He's fluffed both of his first 2 laps, and he hasn't even set a time yet at the moment. So he really needs to lay something down here.
Yeah, he's in the process of doing that right now. And what are we at, just after the 13-minute mark? So, you know, like you said, he's made those couple of errors. Hopefully he can put this one together, because we talk about how crucial it is just to get a banker. He hasn't been able to do that. So the pressure's really on now. The last thing you want to do is start the rear of the field at Mount Panorama in a sprint race.
So he's just exited Forest Elbow and on his way down Conrod Straight aboard one of the Trans-Tasman Racing Commodores. He'll swing through the right-hand kick into the chase. Absolutely critical that he gets a time on the board here, because as things stand at the moment, he would have to start right at the rear of the field, which is definitely not the scenario that he needs when he's currently 5 positions below where he needs to be in the championship. Down into Murray's Corner. You can see the car just twitching a little bit under brakes, comes across the line and vaults himself up to position 2. So managed to nail a lap at the critical time. That's a get out of jail free card for Josh Muggleton.
Oh, talk about pressure when he needed to. This is pretty much his last chance if he had to fluff that. So to put himself in the 3s, that's important, because we saw in practice leading up to the qualifying session, there was about 10 cars that were in the 3s. And of course, we talk about how the track's going to evolve, the way the temperature's going to play out. So, you know, he'll be breathing a massive sigh of relief just to be in P2 right now.
Job Stewart currently fastest in this segment of qualifying, 2 minutes 3.36, his best time in the session. Normally you would have expected Job Stewart, I think, to be in the top 50% based on his proven ability in virtual racing, but because he hasn't been contesting the full series for the Supercars Pro Invitational qualifying series, that's the reason he's having to participate in this lower 50% session. And as it is, he has almost a 0.4 of a second margin over the rest of the field. Michael Talyancic currently sitting in 3rd position. Back then to Harrison Dengate in 4th. Hayden Veld, who was at the top of the timesheets earlier on, back to 5th. And we've had a big incident coming onto pit straight there.
Yeah, it just looks like he just got the rear got away from him and nosed it heavily into the barrier. So unfortunately, well, the session was over anyway, but he's no way of improving now. So unfortunate, but he was just going to have to try and rebound now as the race goes on.
So that was Paul Young crashing there, and he's currently back in position number 13 on the timesheets in this session. Looking at Chris Ireland, who's coming out of Forest Elbow at the moment, and he's one of those drivers who has the potential to sneak into the top 20 if things go well for him tonight. He's currently 24th in the standings, one spot ahead of Josh Muggleton.
So we're pretty much at this session. It's almost over as far as there's a couple of guys just finishing off their laps now. Just trying to see if there's anyone on a hot one there.
Brett Loxton has done a personal best split to the end of the 4th sector. So in real life racing, Mount Panorama is normally divided up into 3 sectors, but in virtual world, because you can have pretty much an unlimited number of timing sector loops around the circuit, we can add a few more sectors, which gives us a good comparative rating on how the drivers are going compared to one another. And at the moment, Brett Loxton looks like he might be on target to improve, and that's important because he is yet to bank a lap time. So let's hope for his sake that he can get this lap together. And yes, he can. Moves up into 10th position.
It's frightening, isn't it? How about it, Jake? If you're in this session, then you haven't banked a lap. You know, when you come to the dying stages of qualifying, it must be heart and mouth stuff. It's hard enough putting down a lap at any racetrack, but when we head to Mount Panorama and the pressure's on to put that banker in, you know the time's ticking, and you know this is your last chance. It must be very, very nervous as a driver.
That's it, Sam, man. I think a few people are actually getting caught out by the weather at the moment. I don't want to sort of harp on too much about it, but we're 42 degrees track, which is quite, middle of the range. I wouldn't say it's too hot, but we've got a 24 kilometre an hour net tailwind heading into the chase. So, these guys are smashing the limiter at 298 k's an hour through the kink. I was just watching Job's lap there. He was 298 clicks before he'd even started to turn into the kink. So you're going to be really struggling to get these things stopped down at the chase. And that's right at the end of the lap. That's when you've taken the good of the tyre. Yeah. There's not much left in it. And that's where the pressure starts to cook in, sort of, if you have to put that last minute lap together as well.
Because it is such a long lap here at Mount Panorama, Jake, how do you go about preparing your tyres on your out lap without taking too much life out of them?
So I think I was doing some laps with Josh and Kurt last night actually, and Madison and I were probably averaging about a plus 20 second out lap, which is pretty unheard of when you talk about real life racing. You do see it sometimes in the top 10 shootout when they do run at Bathurst, but because of exactly that, Lockie, where you need so much drive and so much traction out of the chase, that's 4 minutes after you've left pit lane. So you do really need to slow these things down on the out lap to preserve that rear tyre life and make sure you've got drive late in the stint.
Just having a look at the top speeds there on Conrod Straight. So Hayden Veld, 303 k's an hour, and also Brad Vaughan in 11th position, busting the 300 kilometre an hour mark as well. Brad Vaughan, one of our quite successful real-life racing drivers, won the Super 3 Series last year in quite dramatic circumstances on the streets of Adelaide, managing to defeat Kai Allen in the very last race of the year. And good to see Bradley Long competing in the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series tonight. That is qualifying segment number 1 done and dusted. There is the Logitech G Aston Martin safety car out on the circuit, just doing an observational lap to make sure that the circuit is safe before we get underway for the second segment of qualifying for our top 50% drivers.
How have the nerves been in the TTR camp, Jake? You spoke about leading up to this event. Obviously, there's a couple of TTR drivers, and especially we see with Kirk Stenberg, he was on the Bugable, and then Muggleton struggling to get in. How's the nerves going with the TTR guys trying to make that top 20?
I think both the boys are pretty happy with race pace. Obviously, Borgie's been really busy and he missed last round, so I think he's pretty much done. But you've got Kurt Stenberg in 18th, I think. So he's just there, but one mistake and he's out. And you've got Muggo, I think, 25th. So, they're right on that bubble. And I think they were both worried about quali times. And honestly, I don't think Muggo will be happy with that lap, because as much as he's P2 at the moment, he's 4 tenths off Job. And if you imagine you've got another 20 drivers who are now going to come out, you've got to bet that there's probably going to be a few in front of him, unfortunately.
And the stress levels will be there too, being that it's Mount Panorama. You know, you think if it was a different circuit, you'd probably relax a little bit. But I think I touched on it last week in last week's broadcast that it's hard enough to get around the mountain as it is when there's no pressure. But then when you add the added pressure of trying to make the top 20 and get the best result you can, and then if you find yourself a little bit further down the pack, it's all about stressing to get the job done at the end of the night.
That's right. And I think the stress will definitely be on, especially for Stenny. I think he'll be out in this next session. I think he was really worried about his one-lap pace, but hopefully they put it together. Ultimately, this track's been on iRacing for 10 years now, Sandman. You, me, and both of these two were all actually out racing it back 10 years ago. So they've done more than enough laps around here. It's just a matter of putting the lap together. And as you know, putting a lap together around this track is harder than just about any track on the service. So yeah, best of luck to these guys who have to deal with it.
And it gets 1,000 times harder too when the heart rate starts going through the roof, because you know what's on the line, because you know tonight's result can make it. It's either going to make you or break you, whether you're part of the series or whether you're home sitting on the couch watching it.
That's exactly right. And the scary thing about Bathurst, and the thing that I find so hard, is actually just the nature of the track. You feel like when you get out of Forest Elbow, you're like, phew, I've done this, you know, horrifically scary piece of racetrack that should be so difficult. And then you throw it away in a simple 90-degree corner down at Murray's Corner to finish the lap. It just, it's such a challenging racetrack to get right.
So we've got the big guns out on the circuit for the upper 50% segment of qualifying. Let's remind you of the championship standings coming into this final round of the qualifying series. Dylan Rudd on top of the standings on 550 points. He was the winner of round 2 at Hockenheim in an absolute thriller of a race. It was a blockbuster finish with him and Rehan Leonage going at it for the win on the final lap. Andrew Dyson, super consistent. He's second in the points, 536. Rick Kuznetsov, third on 512 points. Then we go back to Leonage in 4th position. Sean McNamara in 5th position. Brad Rattu, who was the winner at Sandown in the previous round, in 6th position. And then it's Robert Gibbs, Thomas Hinds, Dylan O'Shea and Adam Briggs rounding out the top 10. Now, as we've discussed all season long, it's the qualifying series. It's not about winning races in this series. It's just about making sure you bank solid, consistent points and earn yourself a spot in the top 20. But when you look at how hard these drivers have been racing, how cutthroat the action has been, particularly if you cast your mind back to that epic duel at Hockenheim, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the drivers are battling for the win in the main championship.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't it funny when you talk about the points, it's like, really, it doesn't matter who finishes at the top of the championship and whoever wins races. It's all about making that top 20. So, as you know, we're all racers and we all want to get that checkered flag first. But, you know, crucially, now it's funny to think that we're a part of a championship that we don't really worry about who's going to win it overall.
When you look at the quality, Jake, of the drivers that have been racing in this qualifying series, how nervous are you about competing against them come main series time? Because a lot of them have certainly demonstrated their abilities and their potential.
Well, the thing is, Lockie, is as I mentioned with Sandman earlier, a lot of us have been doing this a very long time, and there's a lot of these guys in this field, the likes of Rehan, for example, who we made reference to before, who haven't. And the thing is we've got 4 or 5 years of racing the ZB Commodore on us, and the Mustang for that matter. What happens if in a month's time we get slung a Gen 3 car and all of a sudden it's a complete reset? And then you've got these guys who are really, really quick, all of a sudden aren't 4 years behind in terms of their skill levels. So I think, you know, if we do get slung a new car, which is a whole nother, you know, can of worms altogether, but that aside, you know, I'd be really looking for some of these guys who have come up really quick and really fast in this series.
It'd truly level the playing field, though, wouldn't it, mate? When you think about it, like you said, the amount of years and the experience that we've got with these cars, it would truly level the playing field if a new one was to come out, and especially if we were to start a new series, or if it came in partway through a series. I mean, we don't really have any information, but it would be incredible to see who could adapt to it quickest.
That's right. Ultimately, you know, the rule has always been, this was the case when the ZB and Mustang come out, but the rule has always been the cream rises to the top. But ultimately, you know, there's some of these young guns who are really, really quick. And if they can, you know, sit down when this new car comes out and work something out before someone else can, all of a sudden they'll be winning races. So, yeah, I'm keen to see if and when we get a Gen 3 car on iRacing, how that'll affect the dynamic up the front.
And you would have to say as well that just like real life, the difference between the Gen 3 car compared to the Gen 2 car, it's going to be a much bigger difference than the change from the VF Commodore and FG Falcon to the ZB and the Mustang. So I think you're right. I think it will level the playing field. We have got just under 9 minutes remaining in this qualifying session, and interestingly, Job Stewart's time from the first stage of qualifying has stood the test of this session so far, albeit they are closing in. Dylan Rudd has gone to within 1/10 of a second of the time that was recorded by Job Stewart. Dylan O'Shea currently still sitting in position 3 ahead of Josh Muggleton. And then we go back to Brad Rattu in 5th position. It gives Talyancic, Dengate, Leonage and McNamara your top 10 at the moment based on combined results from the 2 segments of qualifying. And looks like a flurry of drivers coming into the pits because, as both of you would no doubt agree, you really only get one shot at a flying lap on the set of tyres before you have to come in and bolt on a new set of Dunlops.
Absolutely, and they'll all be now watching the clock, just seeing where they're at as far as how much time left. How good are we that we got these in-car cameras now that we can see the guys back at home? So Kurt Stenberg right up on the wheel. I'm just seeing if he's heading back to the lane now, or if he's just about to start a hot one, because he's actually going slow, so he's probably getting ready to go fast, I think.
One thing that's important to mention as well, guys, is, you know, there are actually a few drivers who are in. I'm actually just looking at it, and it's 200 points is the most that you can possibly get from a race tonight. And currently out on the bubble driver in P20 is Michael Angus at 308 points. So in theory, if you've got more than 508 points, you're in. So that's why I was pretty impressed to see Dylan Rudd jump all the way up to second. He's obviously put the effort in. He wants to win the qualifying series, but as far as elimination's concerned, he's already in. He's going to be on the grid next year.
Yeah, so by those calculations there, Jake, Dylan Rudd, Andrew Dyson and Rick Kuznetsov are all safe. Even if they DNF tonight and get 0 points, they've still got enough buffer that they wouldn't fall outside the top 20.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that must be the best feeling as well. It must be so nice to be able to jump out here at a race like Bathurst and just know that I can go out, I can have some fun, I can try, take some risk. But also, how does that play when you're maybe a teammate of someone who isn't safe and you're racing them for a win? That's something you're going to have to look at as well.
Now, Luke, I don't know if we can see. Oh, no, Stenny's just stuck into the fence. I was going to say if we could probably cross to his camera, because I've just noticed how much he gets up on the wheel when he's having a red-hot go. But unfortunately, the car's got away from him, and he's got a fair bit of damage to that. So he's going to have to fire back and get that sorted. But, yeah, he was having a red-hot go, but unfortunately, the car stepped out, and there's a lot of damage to that car.
And this is, funnily enough, he's facing a very similar scenario to what his teammate Josh Muggleton was facing not long ago. He has yet to set a time, and he's only going to get one more go at it. So that's a disaster for Stenny.
Yeah, that's nervous, isn't it? And it looks like he's out of sequence too. So it's what has he got? 5 minutes. Well, just over 5 minutes to go for this session. So the pressure's really on it. And like you said, he's inside that top 20 just at the moment, but he really needs to make a night of it just to make sure that he can guarantee himself that position at the end of the night.
Running out of sequence can sometimes work for you. Like in that case, had Kurt Stenberg not made that mistake there on the run up through the cutting, he would have had clear track for the rest of his lap, so he wouldn't have been balked or otherwise compromised by slower cars. So, you know, potentially that could have been a really, really good manoeuvre, but unfortunately he got it all wrong at the cutting, and that has severely set back the remainder of his session. In fact, Kurt Stenberg's come into the pits, so Jay, I'll tell you what, it's going to be running it very, very fine to get those repairs done to that Trans-Tasman Racing Commodore, get back out onto the track do an out lap and cross the line in time to start a flying lap, all in under 5 minutes. That's going to be big pressure for Kurt Stenberg now.
Jake touched on it earlier too about how the mindset is on your out lap. You know, you try not to take the best part out of that tyre on the out lap, so he'll be very mindful of that. So yeah, probably by the time he gets the car sorted and around again, it's like the pressure's really going to be on to make that lap count. Well, how close are they up against the wall there? You're great too. They're really having a red hot go at so many different parts of this racetrack. Of course, we don't expect anything less from Mount Panorama. It doesn't matter what we're here for, whether it's an endurance race or whether it's a sprint race. Everyone's having a red hot go and just love, especially shots like this, of how much part of the racetrack they use, hard up on the brakes and trying to get the most out of these cars.
It's a full commitment circuit, isn't it? And it's a track where you do have to be ultra close to the concrete walls to maximise performance, and especially over the top of the mountain. There are so many corners where you are millimetres difference between an epically fast lap or an absolute disaster. As we see Dylan Rudd now jumping to the top of the order, 2 minutes and 3.26 seconds. So now displaces Job Stewart as Dylan O'Shea now goes fastest aboard one of the simrings.com DPR entries.
It's amazing. I was just about to say to Jake that, you know, old Muggo's time's hanging in there, but now this last lap or so, these last sort of 30 seconds, he's really starting to slide down the order. So he's back down to 9th. Even just as I was talking there, he's dropped a couple of spots. So everyone's really starting to make these times count because they know they're running out of time with 3 minutes left in this session.
Yeah, and Sam, and the thing is, we've been talking about it all season as well, but I've actually just noticed that the track temps come down a degree as well, and I feel so much for drivers like Josh Muggleton, who I feel like have been in this scenario all season, where you come off that first half of qualifying sitting on the front row, and by the time qualifying's over, you're outside the 10. So fingers crossed for those guys that they can stay up there. But I think it really shows off how good a lap that was from Job Stewart as well, for him to still be sitting in 3rd.
So Kurt Stenberg did get out of pit lane and he is out on the circuit just doing a warm-up lap at the moment. So he will get one shot at it, Kurt Stenberg. One flying lap to try and move the number 47 Commodore into a somewhat competitive grid position.
Oh, the nerves would be building, wouldn't it, Jake? I mean, Luke, let's see if we can get his in-car camera again and just watch him. I'm amazed at how up on the wheel he is, like especially when you see him go into turn 1 when he starts his hot lap. It's like he really climbs up on the steering wheel to get that car turned in. He's really on it. Have a look at him.
Yeah, Stenny has always driven that way. I've sat in Stenny's rig as a fellow West Aussie, and I have to say I'm not a huge fan of the ergonomics, but he manages to make it work on a good day, and he comes into turn 1 now, nails his apex, drives good in second gear as well, and that's a really key part to this lap, is just getting it off turn 1 because of how long Mountain Straight is. If you can actually nail that, your confidence is up for the whole lap.
I love the eyes. Sorry, go Lockie.
I was just going to say, conversely, if you get it wrong at Hell Corner, that can ruin the rest of your lap before it's even really started. So you're right, absolutely critical to nail that corner.
Just watching his eyes, like look at and how he's getting his body and he's turning the car in, like he just trying his absolute hardest. He's soaring on the steel wheel, getting the power down, and you see, oh, look at that big wiggle there. Oh, lucky to keep it off the wall. He knows that he really has to make this lap count. You can see how much aggression is in the car. It's really, really unstable for him, but he's having a red hot go, and you can see at every point, he's just keeping an eye. He's looking at his shift lights. He's looking at that time. He'd be well aware of how his time's sitting, but man, oh man, now he's just fighting the car as he comes to Skyline.
The car doesn't actually look all that stable, does it? Just the amount of steering correction that he's having to apply, particularly as he plunged down through Reid and Silman Park on the run down to the metal grate. You could see that he was having to wind on some opposite lock just to keep the car pointing where he wanted it to. From your expert driver's perspective, Jake, how's this looking from your perspective?
He had a big moment of IFL coming down into Forest Elbow as well. It's definitely not going to be Stenny's proudest moment. You can see that in his face, but at the moment, it's a lap, and that's all he needs at the moment. So let's hope he can minimise the loss coming down into the chase. Something that's important to note, a bit of a recent development in probably the last 12 months in these cars, is we've started to run low aero at tracks like this, and that really destabilises the car. And with all the degradation being thermal, when you lose the rear over the top, like you see Stenny he do? It makes the whole lap so hard. But he comes to the line now, and it looks like he's going to put a lap together, and it is a 2:03.9, which is actually not too bad. He's done pretty well there.
Moves himself up to position number 20 on the timesheet. So not quite where he'd want to be, I'm sure, but it's still a whole lot better than having to start all the way down at the back of the grid. And we'll be watching out for Kurt Stenberg to work his way up through the field in the race. Checkered flag is out for this session. Just having a look at a few drivers who are completing their final laps. Luke Mitchinson currently scored in 19th position, running out of Forest Elbow at the moment. Thomas Freeman is on a lap 2, so too Michael Angus. Michael Angus, coincidentally, currently the driver who is right on that bubble, sitting in 20th position in the championship points heading into this round.
Always amazing, isn't it, from the commentary box, watching these guys wrestle these cars around the mountain. It's like they leave absolutely nothing on the table, right up against the wall. You think for sure that sometimes they're going to be in the fence, but they do such a great job around here, and it's really good to see them on the knife's edge. They know what's at stake, and this is their last chance to make an improvement on their time.
Look at the top end this thing's got as well as he comes into the chase. That's another thing to bear in mind. You've got this huge tailwind. Getting it stopped as you come down into the chase, Sandman, really, really challenging. You know, you're running lower aero than what you typically run, which means you've got less braking performance and you've got more speed coming into such a braking zone. And it looks like he's going to pull it in.
Looks like dramas here too. So, Sebastian is
Sebastian
just looks
Vardell,
like launched a motor. So, yeah, that's no good. But end of the session.
Better to do it now than earlier in the session or in the race.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want it on lap 1 of the race, do you? Now, I don't know if is that Stenberg behind him, just maybe on another lap. No, it looks like he's fed the wall too. So these guys will be heading to pit lane, and that looks like that's quali over for us.
Indeed. So well done to Dylan O'Shea. 2 minutes and 3.17 seconds. He will be your pole sitter aboard the simrigs.com DPR Mustang car number 19. Dylan Rudd, our championship leader, joining him on the front row. Job Stewart in third spot, back to Rick Kuznetsov. Brad Rattu, Sean McNamara back to Rayhan Leonage. Adam Briggs, Josh Muggleton and Robert Gibbs completing your top 10. Drivers to watch out for starting a bit further back. Andrew Dyson back in 16th position. Actually, you'd have to say that when you look at Andrew Dyson's form over this qualifying series, qualifying has not been his strong point, but he's definitely been a lot speedier in the races, and typically he's worked his way forward into some very good results despite starting a bit further down the order. Kurt Stenberg, as we mentioned, he's back there in 21st position, and some pressure is on him to maintain his top 20 spot in the championship standings. And Michael Angus, the driver on the bubble, in 20th position in the championship. He's got some work to do as well, starting back in at 29th position on the grid. It's an interesting starting grid then for the final round of the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series. Boys, how do you see this race playing out?
I'm holding my breath for lap 1, I tell you, because like we touched on, this place is tough enough as it is, but the pressure's on the line now. This is the point where they all need to be at. They want to make the most they can of this start, and they don't need to get any first lap dramas. And of course, it's easier said than done, because that congestion you get over the top of the mountain on that first lap can be really heart and mouth stuff. So I know that'll be playing in the back of their minds for a lot of these drivers.
And the thing is as well, guys, is we touched on this last week. This is a sprint race, but it's also a 33-lap race. Like, this is not exactly a 15-lap sprint, and we've got to make 2 pit stops over this race distance as well. So there's going to be some strategy in it. It doesn't need to happen at turn 1.
33Ks is not really a sprint race. It's over 200 kilometres in race distance. In terms of pit strategy with the pit stops, we've seen a variety of strategies in the last few rounds. We've seen drivers going for the undercut strategy. We've seen other drivers going for a more, what you would describe as an even tyre strategy. If you wanted to do that tonight, that would mean stopping on lap 11 and lap 22 to divide the race up into 3 even 11-lap stints. But I get the feeling we might see a bit of variation in strategy, particularly some of those faster drivers starting a bit further back to try and get themselves some clear track to maximise the performance of their cars.
Geez, no matter the conditions, whether we're here for a sprint race or an endurance race, there's nothing more exciting than a race around Mount Panorama. I know everyone will be absolutely pumped for this, but it really comes down to this. This decides whether you're on the field for the racing or if you're sitting on the couch.
Indeed it does. Just waiting for Brad Rattu to join the grid. He's scheduled to be starting out of position number 5. Looks like he might be leaving it right to the very last minute to join the starting grid for this, the final round of the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series. There he is, Brad Rattu slots into grid position number 5. So we have the field assembled, we have the field set for a race start. 33 laps, 204 kilometres around Mount Panorama to conclude this qualifying series. And there's bragging rights on the line for the qualifying series. And at the moment, it's Dylan Rudd who's at the top of the standings. All to play for in terms of buying yourself a ticket into the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational E-Series. And we're set to go racing at Mount Panorama to decide who will buy a ticket to the main game. The anticipation builds, the revs rise, lights out, away we go. Slow start from Joe Stewart, bogs it down from row 2 of the grid. A beautiful start from pole position though for Dylan O'Shea. It will be O'Shea ahead of Rudd. Brad Rattu a good start, moving up into position number 3, and contact on the exit of Hell Corner.
Yeah, not the most ideal line. I think thankfully kept it off the wall, but man, everyone's just holding their breath now. And there's a lot on the line for these drivers, so you'd like to think there'd be a little bit of give and take for everyone down through the field. Another car wide there. Oh, did they make contact with the wall? Just trying to see if there's any damage. Might have got away with it, but that's holding your breath stuff right there.
And that was Brad Rattu. So he was going side by side with his teammate Rick Kuznetsov heading into Griffin's Bend. You do not want to be on the outside line there. He tried to hang tough around the outside, but ran out of grip on the exit and got fed out very, very close to the wall. Managed to gather it up, but he's fallen back to 8th position.
No love lost between teammates there, but you've got to be very careful on this opening lap. You know, your tyres aren't still up to temperature and everything else, so just got to be taking it easy. There's so much on the line here, 33 laps around here. You don't want to be doing hero moves on the first lap.
Sorry, go Jake.
I actually spotted something just looking back through the replay, something that we might have just missed on the broadcast, but Michael Taliancic stalled it on the line. And not only that, but he was collected by currently 13th place sitting Brian Borg, and that's going to be both of their races done. So that's a huge deal, as both of those two guys are guys that you would expect to see in this pro invitational series. Yeah, car 777 just did not get off the line, and he was just wiped out by car 7.
Look, he's just sitting there, and he's just got away, but just as he got away, he got absolutely drilled. Man, oh man, that's heartbreaking.
How unlucky for both of those drivers, and good job from the cars that were closely around that accident to not get caught up in it as well. Here is the battle for the lead. O'Shea, your race leader, but under some pressure from Dylan Rudd, who has been absolutely one of the form drivers in this series. We've seen just how fast he's been in race conditions, and he's right in the slipstream of O'Shea as they head up Mountain Straight. Now, one of the things in these races, Jake, we know that there's compulsory pit stops to come for fuel. Do you want to be leading, or would you actually rather be in second position and having the advantage of the slipstream, saving yourself some fuel, and therefore giving yourself the opportunity to have shorter pit stops?
Absolutely, Lockie, you hit the nail on the head, and that's actually something we spoke about in quite some detail last week. And funnily enough, it was Rick Kuznetsov last week who pretty much sat behind the race leader for about 20 laps, and unfortunately the pit stops didn't quite work with him with track position, and we saw Brad Rattu make the most of a really nice sort of undercut to make that all work. But yeah, definitely at a track like Bathurst, there's probably 4 or 5 good opportunities throughout this lap where if you've got someone towing you down the straight, you can save a boatload of fuel into the corners. And that just means that you can take maybe a little bit more or a little bit less in the first stop and gain some track position, or potentially, you know, save some time effectively in your last stop and surprise someone in the end of the race.
You can see how effective the slipstream is there. Look at Dylan Rudd closing in onto the back of Dylan O'Shea as they head down Conrod Straight through the kink. And Dylan Rudd is just going to continue to sit behind Dylan O'Shea, let O'Shea do all of the hard work of pushing the air out of the way. And he'll sit there in the slipstream and keep saving fuel. There is Kurt Stenberg. Fraught qualifying session for him earlier on, but he is on the move. He's made up 3 spots in the opening couple of laps.
And that's exactly all he needs to do. He doesn't have to worry about winning this race as much as or as nice that would be. Just needs to be in a groove and just pick them off one at a time. Don't set himself any unrealistic goals. Just make sure, oh, we've got drama here. Well, let's see, there's another car just up against the fence there out of the last turn, just trying to get it straightened up. A lot of damage to the right side of Paul Young's car. So drama here as they come onto the front straight.
Well, that's the second time tonight that Paul Young's been involved in drama in that section of the racetrack, because we saw him crashing on the exit of Murray's Corner in qualifying as well. And that was Talliance, wasn't it, who was having a moment in front of him. So Paul Young, nowhere to go, and dear oh dear, Michael Talliance having a fraught race this evening.
Yeah, totally out of his hands. I think one of the things you could probably take away from this race, being Mount Panorama, we probably are going to see a safety car. We haven't spoken about that much tonight, but this is probably one of the tracks that you do expect possibly a safety car because of how tight it is up across the top of the mountain. So although these guys are struggling and had some dramas in the opening stages of this race, they'll probably be having their fingers crossed for that safety car to come out.
Safety cars have been a bit unpredictable so far in this qualifying series, haven't they? We had one safety car in the opening round at Phillip Island, no safety cars in round 2 at Hockenheim, and then an appearance last week at Sandown. So it'd be interesting to see if we do see that Aston Martin safety car making any appearances tonight. So far, the incidents that we've had, the drivers involved have been able to get themselves into safe positions, so the safety car has not yet been required.
How would the talk be, Jake? You can imagine that in the TTR camp, they'd all be trying to be pretty calm at the moment. Very early stages, lap 3. They know what's on the cards, and they've got drivers in different spaces of the race. We talked about Muggleton, who's in 9th place. You've got Steady, who's back further. So, obviously those teams would be talking to these guys and trying to keep them calm in these early stages.
Yeah, that's it, Sam. And there's no lack of support at TTR tonight. You've got Brady Myers, you've got Jake Maloney, you've got Lee Ellis, Richard Hampstead, and reigning Supercars E-Series champion Madison Down, all in that channel, helping those guys, crunch the numbers, work out, is 18th enough for Kurt Stenberg? Does he need to make that move for 17th or 16th to make sure that he gets this show next year?
Riding on board with Bradley Vaughan for the big climb up Mountain Straight. He's currently back in 25th position, in behind Jamie Dyke, Hayden Harrison, the next one up the road. And this has pretty much been the pattern right throughout this qualifying A-Series. Wherever you are in the pack, you have always been embroiled in a battle with other competitors. There is absolutely no time to rest or relax when it comes to the Supercars Pro Invitational E-Series. You are always being kept on your toes by some very, very competitive opposition.
And a huge shout out to our competitors that have supplied us with some camera footage of them in their sim rigs. Like, how great is that? We touched on that in quali, that we saw how Stenny likes to get up on the wheel. But, talking about being relaxed, there are some drivers that do have that relaxed driving style, but there's some people up there like Stenny. He certainly gets his money's worth out of that steering wheel, doesn't he? Like, really aggressive, but it works for him.
One of the unique things about sim racing, Lockie, you've obviously got a huge amount of experience commentating real-life motorsport. How good would it be if we could see facial expressions on real-life drivers as they're racing in this kind of thing? It's one of the really awesome things about sim racing, is we get that insight into how they look as they're racing for position.
Yeah, and you certainly capture all of the emotions and in some cases the frustration when things are not quite going right, but thankfully the elation when things are going well. So I do agree with you. It is one of the great things about sim racing compared to real life racing, is that you do get to capture all of those reactions and all of that emotion. One of the things that I want to get your thoughts on as well, Jake, you mentioned before that the cars are running now on a lower downforce configuration to what they have previously. how has that affected tyre degradation? Because one of the things with the Gen 3 supercar is we know that less downforce means that there's a bit less energy potentially going through the tyres, so it means that the tyre degradation might be a bit lower.
Yeah, that's definitely right. I think the actual trim of the car as it's spec'd in iRacing has had no change in aero, but we're just noticing a bit of a shift in people running a lower downforce setup. And that's something that's a really interesting sort of balance to strike, as you say, Lockie, because you're definitely quicker down the straights, which makes you far more raceable in a situation like this. If you're someone who needs to make positions, running a low downforce set might be fantastic because it makes that process so much easier. But by the same token, it means the risk is so much higher of having a slide, which, as we know, thermal degradation being so important on iRacing, you can suddenly have no drive, which means not only do you have, you know, no straight line because you're not getting on all the straights anywhere, but you got nothing over the top as well. So it's definitely, if you're going to run that risk of running a lower downforce setup, you've got to be able to keep the tyre on it.
How nervous is it for the guys when they're testing? Because obviously it's a game of chess, isn't it? It's like, how much wing do you run? Do you want to run a little bit less so you can carry that straight line speed? But like you said, you need it hooked up over the top of the mountain because it gets quite twisty over the top there.
Well, that's it. And that's where the advantage is going to come from these bigger teams, like these racecraft guys, these TTR guys, these DPR guys, even as we're seeing
stops.
Very early pit stops, actually. Lap 5. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a safety car. We've missed the safety car. There's a safety car, guys.
Okay, so the whole field is now going to come down pit lane because we are in the window. So the entire field, you would think, would come in under this safety car and get their compulsory pit stops done. The big question is, why is the safety car actually out on the circuit at the moment?
A little bit of cat and mouse as we go to a replay. It's Michael Whiting. There's a lot of damage to that car. Is that crabbing too? I don't know, but a lot of damage to that car. Oh, look at him. Oh, 3 wide. No thanks. Oh,
no.
It's a recipe for disaster. Huge contact. That sent him spinning. Someone else just absolutely disappeared. Like, that was huge contact.
That there's a bit of deja vu in that, Sam, man. I remember watching a V8 Scops Bathurst 1000 one year, and a very similar incident happened that it actually took out Jared Philsell, who was probably the favourite to win the race at the time. So, yeah, a bit of a miscommunication there as to whether I was clear by the looks of it, and as a result, 2 cars out of the race.
That was just, you would have to say, a bit of a misjudgment there from Michael Whiting because he just moved across a little bit too early. There was still some overlap with the car that was on his left, and unfortunately that has claimed a couple of victims. So the Logitech G Aston Martin safety car makes its first appearance of the evening, and we have had the entire field completing the first of their compulsory pit stops.
And where...
Sorry, go Jake.
Where this becomes interesting to extend from our conversation we were literally on when we worked this out is if you've sort of gone with a low downforce set, banking on the fact that you're going to be doing 11 lap stints, you've now got 27 laps to do on 2 sets of tyres. So your 11 lap stints have suddenly become, 14, 15 lap stints. So that makes a pretty big difference as well.
What this also does is it pretty much balances out the strategy equation. In previous rounds, we've seen that drivers have had different pit stop times. There's been some drivers who've taken on more fuel in the first pit stop and given themselves a shorter pit stop later on, and we've seen other drivers adopting the reverse strategy where they've had a short first pit stop to get themselves some track position so that they're not caught in traffic, but then having to obviously take on more fuel at their second pit stop. But having a look at the pit stop times for the first round of pit stops, it looks like everybody has spent pretty much the same amount of time stationary, give or take a second or so.
Yeah, the drivers would be absolutely shooting themselves in the foot if they didn't jump on this opportunity. Everyone had to pit, so regardless of how much longer we'd have to go on another set of tyres, you would just be ruining your night if you didn't take this advantage. It's almost like a free kick in footy, isn't it? When there's a safety car out and you've got to tick the boxes for the mandatory pit stops, they've all got that out of the way, and now they can run hard and see how the race plays out. And of course, we've seen one safety car who says we're not going to see another one.
What's fuel range for these cars around Bathurst? Is it 24, 25 laps?
Yeah, I think it's probably more on the 23 side. So, in theory, you could get to the end from here, but I'm probably not quite actually. You're probably just a bit short. So, yeah, you're going to have to stop again no matter what. But I'd be a little bit worried if I was Dylan O'Shea. He had probably the shortest pit stop time, I'd say, in the top 10. And not only that, but he was leading that whole stint as well. So he's probably down on fuel on account of his track position, but also down on fuel on account of his pit stop. So if I were him, I'd be taking this this restart, try and gap the field and just see if you can break the draft. That's really the only way you can do this, because sitting in the lead with less fuel, you're signing yourself up to lose this race.
So,
I'm sorry, Lockie, I know it's not in a driver's DNA, but would you even think about possibly giving up the lead and sit in second for a little while?
Oh, you could, but the problem is you'd have to make up, so much fuel on not only maybe Dylan Rudd, who you let pass, but all the other cars that are sitting in tow behind you as well. For me, the only way to do this is to try to break the tow, and if you can't break it, then maybe you try and explore those sort of options.
let's go back and have a look at a replay of the race start, and watch out for Job Stewart. So he started on the inside of the second row of the grid, and he got an absolute shocker of a start. You could see that his car just bogs down, and he had cars having to dart to the right-hand side, and he was 2 positions backwards by the time they exited Hell Corner.
Another car through the gravel trap. Thankfully didn't make contact with the wall there, but it's always a nervous time at the start of the race, and especially when they know what they've got in front of them. 33 laps around here. We say it's a sprint race, but it's far from it, isn't it, Jake? Like, it's no mean feat to bash around here for 33 laps. You've still got your work cut out for you.
No, that's right. Well, even if you take reference to the real life Supercars Championship, I remember when Super 2 used to do their enduro around here, and that was 40 laps. So we're not coming off what other series in the world might call an endurance race. So and even if you look at sort of other national categories that race at this circuit, we're talking 6, 8, 10, 12 laps. 33 laps is a long way, guys.
So positions as they stand at the moment: Dylan O'Shea, your race leader, ahead of Dylan Rudd. Rick Kuznetsov, 3rd position. Robert Gibbs, he's another driver who jumped up during that round of pit stops. He's moved up to 4th, ahead of Job Stewart. Back to Sean McNamara in 6th position. Rehan Leonage in 7th. Josh Muggleson sitting in 8th position. Will that be good enough to get him into the top 20 in the series points? There's going to be a lot of number crunching that's going to have to take place after this race. Adam Briggs in 9th position at the moment, and Brad Rattu back in 10th position at this stage. This race has not gone according to plan so far for Brad Rattu. We saw him running very wide at Griffin's Bend on the opening lap, getting forced wide by his teammate Rick Kuznetsov, and he's lost another couple of spots since that as well. So you'd think we'll get a restart this time around. How hard do you have to work behind the safety car, Jake, to ensure that you keep the tyres at a good operating temperature?
Well, the thing is, Lockie, is all these guys have just pitted, so I think that this is a fairly sort of, I guess, even scenario. I would hope that pretty much everyone's in the same thing, but the thing is because you've come straight out of pit lane on a cold set of tyres and then you've done 2 slow laps, you could actually find getting the temperature up in these first few corners might catch a few people out. So typically sort of weaving the tyres and that sort of thing doesn't work quite as well for us here as what it does for the real guys, but yeah, still curious to see how they break for turn 1.
So it'll be up to the race leader, Dylan O'Shea, to control the pace of the field then at this restart. The Aston Martin safety car has pulled back into pit lane, and if you're the leader, it's all about maintaining a consistent speed until the green flags wave and you get back around to the start-finish line. It's a big angry pack of cars heading down into the chase. And I get the feeling that Jake Burton might be right, and we might see a bit of action at this restart. It's a great opportunity to make up positions if the tyres are a bit cold and the cars are a bit squirmy. So there'll be drivers that'll be keen to try and make up some spots at this race start. Here we go.
I always get a bit of a nervous smile here. Look at them, like they're all bunched up. You're just waiting to see who's going to go first. Do they wait? Oh, they get round the last corner. You would imagine he'd kick it now, and absolutely on the throttle. You can see a couple of the cars wiggling as they get the power underground, but look at them underway here as we start lap 8 at Mount Panorama.
I'm shocked how late he went then, considering how slow he kept it as we got a bit of action coming out of turn 1, 2 cars too wide. Looks to be Robert Gibbs and Joe Stewart, and McNamara's going to look like he's going to try and push Joe Stewart and try and freight train Gibbs here.
Not a great race start from Robert Gibbs. He was a little bit slow away there, and he's going to be on the wrong side of the road when they get up to Griffin's Bend. You do not want to be on the outside there. Joe Stewart down the inside, and you can see Robert Gibbs running wide, and he'll give up not just 1 but 2 positions with Sean McNamara squeezing through there as well.
Yeah, he's using all the real estate a little bit more. Just touched the wall there, so he got a little bit of right side damage to that car too. So, man, it's these guys just trying to build up those pressures, get these tyres up to temperature, and try to not let the leaders get away, and of course, keeping off those walls.
It's like they've got a drive-through penalty as well for car 209. I'm not sure if they're one that are still in this race. They look to be falling back down the field. That's Brett Loxton, so his night going from bad to worse.
These cars move around down through the dipper. That's always a cool part of this racetrack. World famous, especially in our part of the books, to see the guys up on the curb there, right up against the wall and right up against it, absolutely, just shaving a little bit of paint off it. We talk about that. It happens in multiple parts of this racetrack where the guys are using absolutely every bit of the racetrack, but you don't want to do that too many times. When you do too much damage, you don't want to break that back once leak and have that thing rolling around all the way.
Riding on board with Andrew Dyson, currently sitting second in the point standings, 11th in this race, and tucked in behind Brad Rattu in the slipstream for the run down Conrod Straight into the chase. Like I said before, Andrew Dyson on the podium in the first 2 rounds of the series. Hasn't had a great run in qualifying, but he's been very, very good in the races, and he'll be hoping to continue to work his way forward with some good strategy and some good race pace tonight.
Almost thought he was going to stick it up the inside there. He's getting very close. I think he'll be looking for a nice run out. And right here, just get it tucked right up underneath that wing and see what sort of draft he can get. And of course, if he gets close enough, he will think about diving up the inside. You just see, he just starts to pull in a little bit. They're getting towards that braking zone. He's probably a little bit too far. But sometimes, and what I love about in this series is what they should be doing, is just move it around in the mirror so the drivers that are in front are always looking in their rearview mirror, because what you want to do is distract them as much as you can.
Looks like we got some sheep station action going on for about P30 here as well. I just saw Aaron Borg too wide into Griffin's Bend. Doesn't mean that some of these guys may be out of contention for qualifying. Doesn't mean they can't still have a fun race. The sad reality of the qualifying series is a lot of these guys are probably going to have to wait another 12 months before they get another go at this. So why not enjoy your last race before the qualifying series is over?
And Aaron Borg, another driver who's been very, very successful in real-life motorsport. Champion in the Toyota 86 series and champion in the Super Ute series as well.
Of course, any excuse to have a dig around Bathurst. So, like you said, I think he's missed around here, so he's out of it points-wise, but still having a red-hot go. But how is it? That's a credit to this series that there's so many people that are desperate to get in and take part in this championship. It's actually thrilling that we've had 4 rounds as a decider to make that top 20 so you can take part in 2023.
Yeah, it puts some real pressure on it, Sam, man. It's not just about that 1 lap pace. You've actually got to race your way into this series, and that's, something we haven't seen a huge amount of actually in the sort of V8 environment in iRacing here. So it really shows some of the guys who are, experienced in races and can put it down when it counts.
So the battle for the lead continues. Dylan O'Shea still under pressure from Dylan Rudd. This is a battle that's been raging all race long. And all the time that Dylan Rudd is sitting in second position, sitting in the slipstream, he is saving fuel. But when does he decide that it's time to make his move? When does he decide that it's time to attack? Not just yet. You could say that he was just content there on the run up to Griffin's Bend, not to pull out, not to look down the inside, but just to stay tucked in under the rear wing of that simrigs.com DPR Mustang.
A couple of those guys really getting close through the inside of the cutting too, touching the wall. I love these shots. These onboard cameras really give you an understanding of how these cars are behaving. Sometimes it's not easy to pick them up when we go to the outside camera views, but when you're on board, you can actually see just how much they're moving around, how close they get up against the concrete. Check that out. But this is where, you know, these guys think about up on the grass too. Again, up against the wall. These guys are really taking it to it. It's only lap 10 of 33, so they really need to be careful. I would have thought there'd be a little bit sort of, they'd be quite content just to sit and run for a little while, but they are pushing.
The other thing is, Sam, man, I mentioned before that if you're Dylan O'Shea, you need to put the foot down and try and gap the field because you've got a fuel disadvantage, and that's not worked for him at the moment. And something I have to give huge credit to last season's champion in Jared Philsell. He is someone who will not let that happen. If he cannot gap the field, and he's at a track that draft is so dependent like this, and he knows that he's getting out-strategized by people saving, he'll slow that car down to 2.5 seconds a lap off the pace off the front until someone either behind him is sort of forced to pass him or there's a crash or some kind of carnage behind him. And if I'm Dylan O'Shea and I want to try and win this race, that's exactly what you have to do right now. Slow that thing up, start saving 300 metres before the corner if you have to, because at the moment, he's just going to get trounced in strategy.
It's quite an art form too, isn't it, Jake? I know I've scratched my head and tried my absolute hardest to try and go fast and save fuel at the same time. It's not an easy thing to do. So, you know, there are people that out there are absolutely skilled at doing it, and I really take my hat off to them. But, man, to go fast and save fuel at the same time, it's a tricky combination.
We are starting to see some strengths and weaknesses of the two race-leading cars as well. So just having a look at their comparative performance, it does seem like Dylan O'Shea is a bit quicker over the top of the mountain, but Dylan Rudd is quicker down and definitely quicker coming up the mountain. You can see how much Dylan Rudd has closed in onto the back of Dylan O'Shea, heading up mountain straight to Griffin's Bend. But now it's this section of the circuit over the top where O'Shea seems to be able to open up a bit of breathing space, which makes me suspect, Jake, could it be that Dylan O'Shea's car is perhaps running a little bit more downforce?
Possibly. Something else that's something that we need to think about a little bit here is also how the sort of aero wash or sort of dirty air affects these cars. One benefit that Dylan O'Shea is going to have by being in the lead is that not only, you know, does he have clean air in front of him, which means that he can, you know, has a little bit more front turn into a lot of these high-speed corners over the top, but he can also see clearly through the apex of all these corners that you have to be extremely accurate. So, for example, when you come under the tree and into Reed Park and that sort of thing where we're talking, you know, Sam alluded to it before, centimetres on the wall on each side, not having this big ugly Mustang supercar in front of you blocking your view makes a huge difference. So that could be a big factor into why he's managing to pull some time over the top as well.
Nothing short of straight line speed there for Rudd too, because that gap was not too bad coming onto the straight, but he really closed it up. And now you can see right now as they go towards the start-finish line, he's really on the back then. So looks like that aero is really sort of paying dividends for him.
The other thing to remember as well, Sam, and like I said before, you can't afford to just sit there in the lead like that, because not only are you pulling Dylan Rudd along and allowing him to save fuel, but he's probably also saving tyre. He doesn't have to work as hard to pull the lap time out, so we've got some two wide action into turn one here.
Oh, a little bit of contact. Oh, man, holding on to it. Didn't get the best of runs there, like a little bit of a bit of argy-bargy there on exit. So that's actually slipped that GTR Commodore, lost, what, 2, 3, now 4 positions.
And this is a battle outside the top 20 at the moment as well. In fact, specifically, it's the battle for position 23, as we see cars running too high, 2 up through Griffin's Bend. Oh, that's really good racing from all of those drivers to get around that corner side by side without feeding each other into the wall. Can they get through the cutting side by side? Oh, it's going to be tough, but somehow they all make it out the other side just. Full credit to those drivers. Really good racing, Ruben, and respect shown by all of them.
Absolutely. I was holding my breath almost that whole time you were calling that, Lockie, because I was like, for sure these guys end up in the fence, but they've done a really good job to survive and come out the other side.
Thomas Hinds is an interesting one in this pack, guys. He's 27th, and that is very out of character for Hindsy in terms of this season. He's sitting, I think, 8th in the points at the moment. Yeah, so this is a bit dangerous for Hindsy. You don't want to be amongst this kind of stuff, because if you end up parked in the fence, that 8th can very quickly become 21st.
And he takes his sim racing very seriously. Thomas Hinds, there he is on screen at the moment. Puts a lot of effort and energy into his sim racing program. So, yeah, he'll not be a happy camper if things go wrong and he ends up somehow funneled outside of the top 20 in the series points.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely heartbreaking. Oh, you could just see how close he gets to the back of Harrison. But it was like we saw that last round when Veld had dramas. He's obviously had steering wheel issues, and we saw his camera and just how frustrated he was. Mate, can you imagine if you're here an opportunity sort of sitting inside the top 10 at the moment and you get taken out by someone else's incident and then you're out of the series? Like on the last night, that would be a heartbreaker.
That's right, and as I mentioned before, it also means 12 months of sitting on the couch, which when you take your sim racing as seriously as someone like Thomas Hinds and you're racing as often as he is, this has just got to be a matter of controlling your emotions, making sure that you keep them in check and just get the job done.
So the battle for the lead rages on. We are on lap 13, so still 20 laps to go at the completion of this one. Given that the first round of pit stops happened so early, Sandman, what are you thinking for the second round of pit stops? I'm thinking they'll probably leave it until around maybe the lap 18 or 19 mark before they take their second pit stop, just to make sure that they don't have too far to go on their final set of tyres.
Absolutely, and if you find drivers that are in battles too, what they want to do is, like you said, you'll stretch this out as much as you can. Maybe work out, hold your breath for a little bit of a safety car, but what you want to do is put yourself in a position where you've got the best rubber towards the end of the race. So the longer you can go in this and shorten that last stint, if you're in a battle, that rubber is going to be key.
Also, if you're O'Shea, as I say, he's not really slowing up the field enough. If I were him, I'd want to be backing up cars at the moment because you're at such a disadvantage. But the other option he has is he could maybe opt for a slightly earlier pit stop where you'll get some gain from an undercut and you use that undercut to absorb your loss in terms of fuel. So if you've got to take, say, 3 seconds more fuel in the case of O'Shea, you might come down to pit lane, say, 3 or 4 laps earlier. Obviously, that's going to disadvantage you at the end of the race, but that's probably the only chance you've got to keep track position.
But the other disadvantage there as well of taking the earlier pit stop is that you might feed back out in traffic. And we've seen at some other rounds this year that getting caught up in traffic after you've taken your pit stop can cost you a lot of time, and you're really not maximising the advantage of the fresh tyres either.
And that's the advantage you have if you're in one of these big teams and you've got these guys there who can sort of spot for you, tell you where you're going to come out. As we know, it really burned some guys last week, like the likes of Rick Kuznetsov, who felt like they'd driven such a good race, such a smart race, and then get burned by traffic. So spot on there, Lockie, exactly right.
Here is Hayden Veld, currently sitting in 15th position in this race. Hayden Veld, if we look at the championship standings, is back in 28th in the points, so would need a lot to go right tonight if he was to earn himself a spot in the top 20.
Yeah, the thing that hurt him was last week. Obviously, we just spoke about how his reaction on camera when he had that hardware failure, that is what absolutely took him out of the running, because he was well inside the top 10 last week, and now, unfortunately, he's on the outside looking in.
How frustrating is it, Jake, as a driver, if you're having a good race and then you do have a hardware failure?
Well, fortunately, Lockie, in my time I've had a lot of good hardware, so fortunately it hasn't happened to me all that often, but
Good answer. Well played.
It's exactly the same as what you have in real life. If something breaks and it's not your fault, it's just absolutely gutting. And if you're Hayden Veld, you must be hurting, because you know that you're probably going to be in a position to qualify for this series if what happened last week didn't happen. So yeah, really you've just got to try and minimise your losses and make sure that you're smart with how you spend your money on gear and that sort of thing. Maybe cop down the shops and grab yourself some Logitech gear so that you're less likely to have such a failure.
Nicely
Very
done.
nice.
Of course, the Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series and the Supercars Pro Invitational E-Series proudly sponsored by Logitech G. As we've got a moment, so this is Hayden Veld up the inside, making the move through on Luke Mitchison, and that is for position number 14.
Important note with this battle, by the way, is Luke Mitchinson has just been handed a 15-second penalty, so he's probably driving with red mist at the moment as we're seeing him feed someone wide through Griffin's Bend.
Yeah, that's when you really start to sweat it out. You know you've got that penalty, but I guess he's at the point now, he's still sort of there or thereabouts. You want to get that penalty probably over and done with and then sit there and hope for a safety car.
Yeah, it's a bit of a tough one though, because it's 15 seconds. I'd have to clarify, it's not a drive-through, it's 15 seconds. So if anything, depending on how the rules work and whether he can service that inner pit stop, a safety car could actually be the worst thing that he wants at the moment. But unfortunately, Luke Mitchinson, he's currently sitting, I think, just outside the top 20 in terms of the championship. So that could be the last nail in the coffin for him.
He's currently 14th.
So I got the wrong Luke. So yeah, that is actually a huge problem for him then, because that could turn a qualifying spot into a non-qualifying spot.
Looks like a little frustration's kicking in too, because man, that thing was absolutely sideways on exit. And I say it time and time again, looks good on the replay, but it looks terrible on the stopwatch, and it doesn't do your tyres any favour. Look how far sideways that thing is. So he's now probably got the information through that he's got that penalty, and that's probably playing on the back of his mind now.
He had a massive moment in the chase, and he's going to be off the road here.
Yep, you're right. Now, look at him sideways again. Just got to be careful as he rejoins. The last thing you want is that to fire hard left and get contact.
Well, we saw in the real life Bathurst 1000 last year, didn't we? Just how wrong things can go if you go off at the chase and you don't rejoin the road safely, with that horrible accident involving Zane Goddard, where admittedly on very muddy tyres because of the amount of rain, didn't have any control as he rejoined the road and took out the very innocent victims in Dale Wood and Matt Campbell. So you do have to be very careful rejoining the road there at the chase if you go off.
We've had a bit of a change up the front, boys. Dylan Rudd is in 6th. So I want to know what's gone on there. I wonder if maybe he's been freight trained after, maybe a bit of a move with O'Shea or something like that. But Dylan Rudd has fallen 5 spots.
Well, he'd got to the lead, so he'd actually overtaken Dylan O'Shea for the lead, and he's just, wow, so he's gone off all on his own at the chase. Unbelievable.
And again, the rejoin. So, yeah, the best thing you could do, the damage is already done when you're firing off through the grass. All you can do is maintain composure, trying to get it as straight as you can, get the power down and rejoin. But man, oh man, yeah, that's been a little bit costly for him. And now look at that. We were talking about Muggleton in qualifying. He now finds himself in 7th place now. So slowly moving his way up the order.
I'm so hesitant to say anything positive about Josh Muggleton because I just don't want to jinx the man. He's doing really well at the moment. Same with Kurt Stenberg. He's found his way up from 21st to 13th at the moment. So there's some big shakers, especially when you consider you've got, the likes of Brian Borg, the like of Luke Mitchinson, people who were just inside the top sort of 20 who have now had things go wrong. It's possible to sort of jump them.
That was a weird incident there, though, for Dylan Rudd, wasn't it? I wonder if that was just a case of having got to the lead because he'd been sitting in 2nd position for so long that he got out of rhythm with his braking reference point into the chase and just went a little bit deeper than he needed to.
100%, Lockie. When you spent 16 laps of this race in heavy tow, probably braking 100 metres earlier and rolling out of it for fuel saving, and all of a sudden you've got to go back to threshold on an old tyre for the first time in the race, it's definitely very easy to make that kind of mistake. So there's no question something like that happened there, and very costly because he's now fallen back to 8th.
So we saw a replay there of how Dylan Rudd got to the lead. So it was up Mountain Straight, got the move comfortably done by the time they got to Griffin's Bend, and then that was how he lost it, just running too deep under brakes into the chase and running off the road. And like you say, he's fallen all the way back to 8th position. So it's now O'Shea back to the front. Kuznetsov now takes up the attack for the 9.5 SimSport team. Joe Stewart in the Pursuit Sim Racing Commodore moving up into 3rd position. And those top 3 cars are all separated by just 0.9 of a second, so it's still seriously close at the front of the field. The second round of pit stops, you would think, not too far away.
Put yourself in the race, Jake. Where do you want to be? Like you say, you know, you don't want to be leading. You just want to stay in touch with the front running pack. But as we get, what are we, lap 17 now of 33? I guess it's now starting to think about putting those chess pieces in place. Start thinking about that pit stop and then what you're going to have to carry on towards the checkered flag.
Well, that's it. At the end of the day, we're only halfway there, guys. There's still quite a long way to go in this race. So it's not, it's, you know, you still got to pace yourself. This isn't the time to pull the trigger yet, I don't think. You do want to be smart about your pit stops, but also, you know, likes of where I'd want to be is one of those 3 guys who's already qualified. But if you're on the bubble, especially the likes of someone like Josh Muggleton, for example, who's finally having a good night this season, you got to just sit there, make sure you make no mistakes, keep it out of the fence. And if there is a late race safety car, make sure that you've got a car underneath you that's still capable of racing for position.
This is a good battle. Sebastian Vandel and Thomas Hinz. Hinz probing for an opportunity at the chase, but no option to go down the inside there. If anything, that's actually cost Thomas Hinz a bit of time because he's had a narrower approach line into the chase. And looking a bit further back to Michael Taliancic in that very battered Commodore, stalled on the grid earlier on, got rams from behind. And currently sitting down in 31st position.
Looks like I've managed to get that car tidied up a little bit as well, though. So unfortunately, I think Tally is on the lead lap, which is good. He's managed to keep on the lead lap, unlike Brian Borg, who is totally out of the race from the same incident. So, yeah, Tally could be looking for a safety car or something here. He might still get in this.
Gosh, sorry, I was just watching Muggleton. Man, that thing is sideways. It's got a little bit of a birthmark up the right side too, so a little bit of damage there, and he's got like a little bit of pressure too that's starting to be like at him. But look at this. You can see just as he starts to turn it in, sideways. It's always a tricky part of the racetrack. Look at that. But enough control there where he's not too close up against the wall, so thankfully keeping it off the hard stuff.
He's coming under some pressure from Dylan Rudd, who will be pretty fired up after making that mistake and throwing it off the circuit all on his own at the chase. Dylan Rudd will be pretty keen to try and make up spots as Muggleton has a massive slide out of Forest Elbow. Does he manage to gather it up? Yes, he does, just. But he is going to lose 3 positions in the process, make that 4. He falls from 7th position back to 11th. And I'll tell you what, he was actually very lucky there not to end up in the fence on the left-hand side of the road.
Jake, what were we just saying? We were too worried about talking up Muggo stocks, and now look what's happened.
Yeah, that was terrifying.
He's going to kill me.
I gotta say though, exceptional car control from Muggo to hang on to that one. That thing was pretty much gone in every sense of the word. And this is another one of those things that we were talking about with sort of thermal degradation and how it works in this car. Like you saw those few slides over the.
Here we go, more contact. Oh, that's going to fire. Is that Borg firing up? I don't know if he's going to be able to keep it off the wall. He did, thankfully. But man, oh man, that was a hold your breath moment.
Yeah, 3 wide through the chase is never going to outcome anyone good. But catch a replay of that one. It looks like it looked like one car just ran a little bit too deep coming down there, and you got that sort of triple over under scenario that sort of happens in a situation like that. And unfortunately, Borg come off worst.
Sorry, Jake, I cut you off when you were talking about the tyres because we did mention that up over the top of the mountain, he was already having those moments. So the car was sideways. So that's obviously where the tyres were starting to overheat. And then he came out of that corner, and that's where the car got away from him.
That's it. You saw him have those few slides. He had another one actually coming through McPhillamy, and you can really hyperheat the tyre. And the good thing is you can bring it back. So if Muggo was able to sort of keep the calm a little bit for a little bit, he might have got away with it. But I think he was just trying to get such a run off Forest Elbow to protect himself from the likes of Dylan Rudd into the chase, and that combined with the few slides that he'd had earlier in the lap, it just meant it was too hard to put the power down. But as I said, very good effort to have saved that car, because that car was pretty much gone as far as I'm concerned.
Tell you what, it's on here for the lead. The top 4 cars have closed right up. So you've got O'Shea, Kuznetsov, Stewart, Sean McNamara has now got himself to within 1.2 seconds of the race lead, as well as we have a super slow-mo replay. That was Job Stewart getting just a little bit too close to the wall on the inside at Forest Elbow. I know that you want to get as close as you can to that inside wall because the road canters heavily inward and it actually helps you get around the corner, but you don't want to be getting that close.
It's also a bit of a weird dynamic that we've got up the front at the moment because, like we mentioned before, car 19. So that's our race leader. That's Dylan O'Shea. He is probably the most at risk, although I'd say he's pretty safe championship-wise. He's sitting P9, 446 points, so relatively safe. But he's got Rick Kuznetsov behind him, who's totally safe and has absolutely nothing to lose. And then you've got the likes of Job Stewart, who realistically is probably out of this thing, and he's actually probably not going to make it no matter what happens. So you've got a really bizarre top 3 in terms of, who's willing to take risk.
It's like you said too, being this, every racer wants that checkered flag, especially Mount Panorama. But if you find yourself in a position where you don't have to win, you can sort of go for that gamble, I guess. Could you, Jake? I mean, as far as, you don't have to worry about, it's not all about grabbing wins and winning the championship. It's only 4 races for this qualifying series. So if you find yourself in a good points day, you don't really have to worry too much about getting that checkered flag, as much as we all love it.
That's right, and again, it's sort of a weird dynamic because you've got 3 guys in the top 3 who are all looking at this probably 3 different ways. So, Dylan O'Shea is probably like, I'll happily finish 3rd. I just don't want to be involved with you 2. It's a bit of a weird one, but I'm curious to see how they all approach it, especially in terms of strategy, because if you're someone like Job Stewart and you're 3rd and you're probably not going to make it into this championship on account of what's happened earlier in the season, do you just throw a massive undercut at it to try and get some track position? We saw how fast he was in qualifying. Maybe he could just get into the lead and drive away from this thing like we saw Bradley Ratsu do last week.
Absolutely, and it's like you said, it doesn't matter, regardless, it's still a race at Mount Panorama. So if you find yourself in your position where you may miss a cut, go out there and have some fun. Give it the best crack you can, because it'll still set you up for a decent result. And then if you can get that, and every time you do a lap at Mount Panorama, you're always learning and race. Any races, we look in the background, I can see cars coming into pit lane.
And that's Dylan Rudd. So that is the car that we spoke about earlier, who was probably, fairly interesting in terms of the whole fuel discussion. He was doing pretty well, saving for a majority of the race. And now he's come in early, probably to try and offset some of the loss that he encountered earlier in terms of track position.
And Adam Briggs, Brad Ratu, Andrew Dyson, they've all come in as well. So we are inside the window for the second round of pit stops. And obviously the race leading group of cars will be watching closely what's happening there, because what they don't want is to be undercut by Dylan Rudd on a fresh set of tyres, or slowing each other down by battling against one another. It's closed up at the front. That's now just 0.9 of a second separating the top 4 cars. What do you do here? Do you keep pressing on, or do you pit knowing that you have to think about covering off the drivers like Dylan Rudd who have come in?
Well, I think when you're Dylan Rudd, you've sort of fallen a few seconds off. So I probably don't think these guys are thinking about that just yet. But I will say that, a smart thing to do at a track like Bathurst is a 1-lap overcut doesn't do a whole lot. You throw away, a second and a half straight off the bat, losing that track position due to the undercut the other guy's going to have. But you don't really get it back in terms of a decent amount of degradation in the car. So if you're going to go long, go properly long. Run this thing out to lap 25, 26 and have a nice run to the end.
Would you be nervous though when you see these groups of cars, when you see that there's a little bit of action happening in front of him, you haven't made your pit stop? Do you want to take that risk just to get out of the mess? Because the last thing you want to see is a car, when you see how close they are, like these cars that are bunched up, you don't want a car to have a moment and take you out of the race. That's
right. And again, this is where a little bit comes into play with regards to your sort of spotters and who's going to help you in terms of finding some track position as well. Because an overcut doesn't work if you don't have the opportunity to lay down fast times as well.
So Kuznetsov, McNamara, Gibbs and Leonage all in the pits. Dylan O'Shea has stayed out on the circuit, as has Job Stewart and Josh Muggleton.
Yeah, it looks like Sten stayed out as well. So these guys just running that little bit longer. I'm keen to see how this plays out. Looks like a good bounce back for these two, but obviously it's changing a little bit because of the mixed pit stops. There's a lot of cars that are starting to make their pit stop. And okay, so you don't want to go too long, but then do you want to maybe go the risk of possibly, maybe a safety car that could work in your favour? What do you do, Jake? What do you think TTR are doing as far as the likes of those guys, because they know that they haven't made their pit stop yet?
Well, TTR have Madison down in the box tonight, and the BJR strategy that we use is to go long, and it looks like we've got a bit of action coming out of the
Well,
pit
here we
stop.
go. So this is between teammates. So Dylan Rudd has got ahead of Rick Kuznetsov, who's just come out of the pits, but it's Dylan Rudd who has pulled it off with the undercut strategy. So remember, he was back in position number 6, but he's jumped himself right back into the lead pack by virtue of pitting 1 lap earlier. So the undercut has worked for Dylan Rudd. He's got himself back into the game.
Yeah, and that's brilliant, because not only that, but he's got clear road ahead of him, Lockie, so he can really put the foot down, and the guys who have continued to go long, he's going to get even more of an advantage of. So we mentioned that it might be a smart play, having lost the position, to sort of try the undercut to try and get some of it back. And it's a treat.
Holy dooly, he's having a go though. It looked like that tyre got up on the grass. You don't want to take too many risks out there, because that's such a high-speed part of the racetrack. You get that tyre on the grass, you're going to swap ends real quick.
Looks there like Kuznetsov maybe just taking a bit of time to get his rear tyres up to temperature as well, because the car was moving around a lot over the top of the mountain. And if anything, it actually allowed Dylan Rudd to escape a bit, as our race leaders are in. Dylan O'Shea and Job Stewart both pit out of positions 1 and 2 respectively. Critical pit stop coming up for these two drivers to make sure that they stay ahead of Dylan Rudd.
Yeah, this essentially is going to determine the race leader. So you knew that they couldn't stay out any longer. They really had to pit this time because of what was happening behind them. So now the field will be going to see where O'Shea joins.
And O'Shea had that fuel disadvantage that we spoke about as well, so I'm really hoping he can hang on to track position here, because he has the potential to not only overcut but lose some spots, as we see Borgie slowed down again coming to the chase.
Indeed he has. So this is going to be very interesting here to see where O'Shea and Stewart rejoin relative to Rudd and Kuznetsov.
Miles back. O'Shea is miles behind him. And this is what I said at the start of the race, guys. Like, you can't afford to just sit in the lead and sit like a duck and just let everyone behind you save fuel, and that's really punished him there. Even Job Stewart jumped up 2 or 3 seconds up the road.
Check out that replay here. This is what happened to Borg. Oh, it's hard going through there side by side. He's gone in a little bit deep. Got up on the curb, just hasn't been able to turn it in, and he's had to scoot across the grass. So thankfully there's no damage there, but he's had to give up a couple of positions.
So Dylan Rudd, therefore, goes back to being the effective leader of the race. In fact, when we look at the effective race order, taking into account that there are 4 cars that still have to complete their second pit stop, it is 9-5 SimSport cars running in positions 1, 2 and 3 at the moment.
As that first strategy, Jake, they've really pulled the pin at the right time, haven't they? Lap 23 of 33, and it's nice and close up the front. It's still not over, but man, that's been a nice little bounce back.
Yeah, and you put yourself at such an advantage when you've got 3 cars up the front like that. You're so protected if you're the race leader. You can just sit, you can drive nice laps, you can sort of, tow your teammates along in a situation like this, as it looks like we've finally got Josh Muggleton into pit lane as well.
Based on the undercut, I think that this might be a bit costly for both Josh Muggleton and Kurt Stenberg. I think that they're going to lose a lot of track position as a result of delaying their stop a couple of laps. You can see just how costly it was for Dylan O'Shea, not just stopping later, but also the fuel disadvantage and the fact that he had a slightly longer pit stop there, because he has fallen back in behind not just Dylan Rudd and Rick Kuznetsov and Sean McNamara, but also Job Stewart and Rehan Leonage. So Dylan O'Shea falls back to what will effectively be 6th position.
Safety
being
car.
the race leader, and we've got another safety car. There you go.
Oh, wow. So now we've just got to see what is now. Again, I think this happened to Muggleton last week when he pitted. Just as he pitted, the safety car came out just as he exited. So it looks like it might have bit him. But at the end of the day, he was still going to have to take his stop, and he would have fired in. Still would have lost those spots. He finds himself back in 12th now. Stenberg back in 15th. But what this does now is this bunches the field back up together.
And that's what you want if you're Josh Muggleton. Like, looking at his car, he's had good top end all race. He has struggled for tyre life, but that might be a consideration as well. Hey, I've had a rough car. I've struggled to keep the rear tyres on it. Should I take the pain in this second stint and then set myself up where I can attack in the last stint, knowing I've only got sort of 9 laps to do?
And there is the reason for the safety car. So top Blackburn, and that looks like potentially an engine failure for the number 947 ZB Commodore, the Race on Oz entry, and his night is done.
That's a shame, especially with as close to the end as we are. It's always heartbreaking when a motor goes like that, but he's obviously had his fair share of dramas. The car's not in the best of conditions, but that's not over for him now, unfortunately.
He was 27th in the standings coming into tonight's proceedings, so you'd have to say pretty unlikely he's making into the top 20 anyway, but that is the nail in the coffin for his chances of qualifying for the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational A Series, as we see Bailey Frid, the sole remaining car to complete its compulsory pit stop, coming in now for its second and final pit stop.
Yeah, and
Oh, I'm sorry, go, Luke.
No, go for it.
I was just going to say that while we've got the safety car, we might take this opportunity to take a short commercial break. We'll be right back from Mount Panorama, round 4 of the qualifying series for the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational.
You're watching the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series in the commentary box with you tonight. Steve Sandman Clark, we've got Jake Burhan and myself, Lockie Mansell, talking you through all of the action. You are watching it live thanks to the Race Stars TV network. All of the pit stops out of the way. We are currently under safety car conditions due to a mechanical problem for the car of Tyler Blackburn, which has stopped on top of the mountain just before the Gumtree. Bit of other housekeeping as well. A drive-through penalty has been imposed upon car number 84, and that is for an unsafe re-entry to the circuit at pit lane entry. Sebastian Flock is the driver of car number 84, and he's currently in position number 29. And that's a bit of a drama for him because he is coming into tonight 18th in the point standings. So not an ideal situation for him, and potentially going to slip outside of the top 20 and out of qualification for the Supercars Pro Invitational E-Series with that penalty.
It's tricky, isn't it? Especially when we're this late in the race now. What do we got? It's like 25 to 33, so that just makes things massively more difficult. You don't think that it's going to be too easy for him to bounce back from here. But hey, stranger things have happened. It's Mount Panorama. We've seen our second safety car, and it's going to be an absolute sprint. We talk about this was a sprint race, but it's really a sprint race now. These guys have got all their CPS out of the way. They know what they've got underneath them, but now it's just an absolute flat-out race to the checkered flag to see who's part of our series for 2023.
Yeah, I reckon we'll do one more lap behind the safety car, so it'll be a 7-lap sprint to the checkered flag. Jake?
Yeah, I was actually just going to comment on the same thing. I'm surprised that the safety car didn't come on down this time, because we've been talking all race long about how 33 laps isn't a sprint. Well, it's a sprint now. It's going to be a 6 or 7 lap race to finish this thing off, like you mentioned.
But now that all of the pit stops are done, all of the fuel saving pretty much goes out the window, doesn't it? It's just drive the car as fast as you possibly can, and if you feel like you're faster than the car ahead of you, go for the move.
That's it, and I'd like to hope that all these guys have fueled correctly. You know, if you fuel safely, and then we've got another lap of safety car now, so you'd like to think all these guys are probably good for fuel to get to the end, but you never know what can happen.
Yeah, you'd find probably worst case scenario, a lot of these guys would be clutching it, especially down the mountain, just to make sure you've got that little bit in reserve, because that's the last thing you want. You don't want it to be coughing on the last lap, especially when you see how tightly bunched this pack is now. This safety car's brought everyone together, and now they know that it's just a hard charge to the checkered flag.
So let's have a look at some of the drivers who are on the bubble in terms of qualification and where they are in the race. So equal 16th in the points, Damien Johnston and Kurt Stenberg. Damien Johnston in this race, currently 26th. He'll be a bit nervous in that position. Kurt Stenberg's up to 12th. You'd think he would probably be okay. Sebastian Flock, 18th. We've just talked about him. He'll be very nervous to be back where he is at the moment. Bailey Frid is 19th in the points, currently 27th in this race. So another one who might be a little bit nervous at the moment. Michael Angus on the bubble in 20th position in the standings. And in terms of the race, he is all the way back in 31st position. So another one who could drop out of calculations. Harrison Dengate, 21st in the point standings. In this race, he's 17th, so he's one who might move up inside the top 20. Michael Whiting is out of the race altogether, so you'd have to say that he's done. Jamie Dyke is 16th at the moment, so he might creep up. Christopher Ireland and Josh Muggleson are probably the other two that we need to look at. Chris Ireland, his night has done. He is 6 laps down and he's in 34th position, so he will not be making it. But Josh Muggleson, 25th in the standings coming into tonight, but currently 11th in this race. Could Muggo spring himself into the top 20 in the last round of the season?
Mate, I tell you what, I reckon the boys at TTR have got that calculator smoking at the moment. They'd be working out the points and seeing where he's at, whether he's safe or whether he needs probably 1 or 2 positions just to get himself into that spot. But man, that's heart and mouth stuff. He's really brought himself back into the game. This safety car's worked in his favour, and if he needs a couple more spots, watch him try and be aggressive at the start.
Let's not forget that he's also got the best rubber of anyone in front of him. Yeah. He literally pitted right as this safety car came out. So everyone will get a bit of a reset. As we say, thermal deg being so important here on iRacing, a lot of these cars who had done a few laps will get a little bit of a free kick for a couple of laps as the tyre temps start to come down during this safety car period. But once we get about 2 or 3 laps under green, that's where Josh Muggleton's pace will really start to show.
Now, Jake, if you're in the driver's seat, if you're leading this race, if you're Rudd, where do you go? Do you go now or do you wait?
I reckon you go early. I reckon go through the chase, because last time round we went right on the kink of the last corner. You got to do something different. You also got your teammates behind you, so you could maybe count them in, see if you can get all 3 of you away. Try and sort of communicate this, get away, but I reckon you got to go early, but we'll see what happens.
Yep, and they are going now. So, yep, you called it. They've spoken to each other. They've all worked it out. They've got it. Look at that. They've already started to gap the rest of the field.
Exactly right. It looks pretty even through the rest of the field, though. Like, that top 4 cars got away, but this mess from about 5th through to probably 15th or 16th is very, very tight.
But by accelerating well away early, it's just spread the field out a bit more than what we saw at the previous safety car restart. Like you said, the top 4 cars. Oh no, we've got drama at Hell Corner. Crunch. Bang in the fence.
It's Bradley Vaughan.
Brad Vaughan, yeah, it was indeed. So he's got it all wrong at Hell Corner, whacks the wall, manages to gather it up, thankfully without any other cars being involved there. But beautiful restart from Dylan Rudder, and like I said, the cars behind him, Kuznetsov, McNamara and Stewart all went with him. Lenage probably a little bit slower to react, or it could have just been that he was in the middle of the chase and not able to accelerate away as quickly as the 3 cars ahead of him. But it's overall, it's had the effect of just spreading out the field a bit more than what we saw at the previous safety car restart.
I'll tell you what, it's never good when you have a moment and you're off the track in these races, but it's never good at a safety car restart because wherever you are on track, you pretty much go to dead motherless last. So that's a bad position for him.
Also looks like we've had a bit of a redress as well. I think it's the 938 and the 2. Both of those cars pretty much out of contention, I think, by the looks of it. But nonetheless, a bit of a redress back in the field. I think, yeah, Robert Gibbs gave it back to Bradley Ratu by the looks of it. So they're there, but I don't think that'll make a huge difference in terms of our racing championship.
Dylan Rudd, now that he's out in front, he's got pace to burn. Look at the margin that he's already built over his teammates on the opening lap after this safety car race start. So he was definitely saving fuel earlier in the race, but now that all of the pit stops and strategy are out of the way, this is where he is absolutely demonstrating the race pace of that 99095 SimSport Commodore.
A nice position to be in too. When you're leading the pack, you start pulling away. You've got teammates who's supporting you behind you. I mean, everything's really working in his favour at the moment. It's pretty much eyes forward now. He's got nothing to worry about. It's just sort of hitting his markers. And if he puts it all together for the next few laps, he's looking at a checkered flag at Mount Panorama.
And this is the spot you actually want to be in, guys, because the thing is with this car is obviously the closer you get to the car in front of you, the better the tow becomes. But also the aero push tends to get pretty bad around that 6 or 7/10 mark. Obviously, it's quite bad when you're right behind someone, but the advantage you get from the tow sort of outweighs it. But once you're about 6 or 7/10 off the pace, that's where the sort of push starts to get really bad over the top, and you don't get the gain down the straight, as we've also seen a purple lap from Adam Briggs that last time by, so some late race pace from him coming too.
2 minutes 3.4 for Adam Briggs, who's up behind Dylan O'Shea, our early race leader at the moment. They get so close to the wall, don't they, as they plunge down over the skyline. We've seen more than one driver just glancing the wall with the left-hand rear of the car as they flick it right down into the S's.
I'm surprised how many people do it. I mean, you know, you obviously can get away with it once or twice, but geez, the more you flirt with danger, especially around here, the last thing you want to do is bend that race car, because not only can you do damage and break the rear, but you just don't want to hurt that aero advantage too. But talk about aero, look at Rudd, mate. He's absolutely flying. He's gapped the field by 1.2 seconds now, and he's just in cruise mode.
And that's the kind of thing that you want in a race like this. At this late stage where you've only got 5 laps to go, you want to be able to say to yourself, all right, I can drop 2/10 a lap and still win this race. That's awesome. That's he's sort of sealing the deal for himself at the moment.
And you've been in this position too, Jake. When you've got teammates that are playing rear gunner for you, it almost takes the pressure off and makes you feel in a way that you're pretty much on your own, that you've got absolutely nothing to lose because you've got a couple of teammates that are looking after your rear end.
That's exactly right. And when Lockie was referencing before where you can sort of hang it off the wall, having confidence as well to be able to do that lap on lap is sort of, it's all part of the sort of emotional state you get yourself in. And when you've got a lead, when you've got 2 teammates behind you, you can have a lot more confidence and know that you can sort of throw the car around, and that's not going to put you at too much risk. But a move into Griffin's there.
Oh, it's not going to pay off, is it? Is he going to tag the wall? He's run wide and he's given up a few positions, so hopefully he kept it off the wall, but man, that was close.
That was Dylan O'Shea trying to get down the inside of Rehan Leonage, and he was down the inside but just couldn't get the car stopped for Griffin's Bend. He's run wide, and in fact he's fallen back in behind his teammate Andrew Dyson. Here's a look at it on the replay. Adam Briggs, nice judgment there to avoid that one. Brad who gets through there as well, and so too does Andrew Dyson. So O'Shea, the early race leader, it seems a long time ago now, because he's all the way back to 9th position.
Oh, I think that might have been Rehan that may have touched the wall up a little bit earlier, but up in front. But he's having a cracking race. We haven't spoken about him much tonight. He's found himself in P5, and we're lucky enough to have his camera as well, where we see him behind the wheel. So he's having a red hot going in the dying stages. He finds himself in top 5. That's not too bad at all.
One of the young rising stars of the sim racing scene. Ultra impressive in round 2 of this qualifying series at Hockenheim, where we saw him racing wheel to wheel for the win with Dylan Rudd. They were side by side for virtually the entire last lap, and Rehan showed maturity beyond his years in that battle. And once again tonight at Mount Panorama, one of the most daunting circuits that we see these cars race at, he is put in a fine and mature performance and currently holding down a top 5 position.
Just having a look, and Josh Muggleton hasn't quite had the advantage on tyres than I thought he might have done. But something I was thinking as well is, unfortunately, we're not in the position right now to provide you guys with live points, but it's possible that TTR have crunched the numbers, and maybe Muggo doesn't have to do anything more. Maybe he's happy just sitting here because he knows he might have done enough. But yeah, not too sure. It just seems like he hasn't quite got the pace that I expected with him on green tyres.
No doubt, as we have discussed, the number crunching will have been done by the team of Trans-Tasman Racing, and I think that's the importance, isn't it, in this position of having a good team behind you to make you understand exactly what the point situation is, and make sure that they counsel you so you don't take any unnecessary risks or get flustered in the car. That's the advantage of having a good crew on the radio to you during these races.
Well, you'd really hate to be in a position where you sort of go for a big lunge, take a risk that you don't need to make, have a crash, and then find out afterwards that you didn't even need to make it. So yeah, there certainly is an advantage. Having a look at the TTR chat, though, I don't actually think they've got any idea what's going on based off what Richard just said. But nonetheless, yeah, Muggo driving smart at the moment, knowing that he's in a half-decent position and he's in a shot with some of the bad nights that you rattled off before, Lockie, that other drivers have had, that you may not need to take that risk.
Yeah, on the other hand as well, though, wouldn't it be frustrating if he gets to the end of the race in 11th and then finds out afterwards that if he finished 10th, that would have been good enough to qualify. So, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, but anyway, he's definitely had one of his more trouble-free performances of the season so far.
Well, I'm having an absolute giggle watching Kirk Stenberg. It's like he's whipping the horse. He's trying to get that thing going faster in a straight line. He's really got some up and go about him. I think he's excited about the position he's in. It's good to see him actually having a decent run, but he's got a little bit of pressure for Pine, so maybe that's why he was whipping it.
Yeah, Stenny historically one of the unluckiest drivers, I think, just about on the grid. So as of right now, again, I haven't done the exact math, but with him being, I think, 18th or 16th equal, I think, in the championship and sitting 12th at the moment, you'd have to say he's probably all right. He's just got to put these last 3 laps away. Now,
if you were in his seat, do you want someone in your ear telling you just hold, like you should be pretty right if you finish there?
Yeah, I think it depends on the driver. We alluded to this last week, how certain drivers like some silence, some drivers need some coaching and sort of psychology to be calmed down. But I think Stenny's definitely one of those guys. You need a Madison down in your ear saying, Stenny, head down, bum up, just get it done.
Lap 31 and 33, we're slowly running out of time here at Mount Panorama, and for a lot of these drivers, it's all about season 2023, because the people that make the top 20, they're in. Like we said before, the people who don't, they're sitting on the couch and they have to listen to us for the year. Wouldn't wish that on anyone.
Thomas Hidd sitting in position 20 at the moment, under some pressure from Michael Talliazic, whose night got off to a terrible start when he stalled on the starting grid, but he has made somewhat satisfactory recovery since then and moves back up into 21st position. I think the early safety car definitely works for Michael Talliazic, because not only was he able to come in under that safety car and get his car repaired from that accident, but also it allowed him to catch up to the rest of the field. Here's a good battle between the StimRigs.com DPR teammates down the inside. That is a move for Dylan O'Shea on Andrew Dyson, but he's out-braked himself, runs it off the road in the chase, and not only does he lose the spot back to his teammate Dyson, but he's also going to lose another spot. This is tight. Josh Muggleson might have the opportunity to grab a spot here. Massive slide out of Murray's corner, and that's going to cost Muggleson a couple of spots that potentially he could not afford to lose, given the perilous situation that he's in the championship.
Oh, Jake, you touched on it before. Muggo's car control. Have a look how sideways this thing gets. Unbelievable. He's on the anchors. He's got his teammate in Stenberg going around him. Man, oh man, he was so lucky. If he had a bender, it would have been season over.
That's two scenarios in this race where Muggo has had that car 60 degrees to the racetrack pointed at the fence and he's managed to save it. So huge testament to his car control, but I have no doubt that Muggo is probably punching himself at the moment over that. That is an absolute huge mistake that, as Lockie mentioned, we don't unfortunately know, but could be the difference between him making it into this series or not.
And that was all created because of that mistake. Oh, as we've got 2 out of our 4 race leaders glancing the wall at Sulman Park on the run down through Metal Great. They are absolutely on the ragged edge. And these drivers, as they push hard in the battle for what is second position, McNamara and I think Job Stewart as well, both glancing the wall with the right-hand sides of their cars. But that incident down at Murray's Corner with Josh Muggleton, that all started because of the mistake for Dylan O'Shea at the chase. And it was as O'Shea was gathering it up and rejoining the road that Muggleton was forced to the outside on the run into Murray's Corner. Ended up slightly wide of the ideal racing line and got all crossed up. As here is the battle for the final podium position with Job Stewart right in the slipstream of Sean McNamara. Both of them deep under brakes into the chase. And McNamara managing to fend off the attack from Job Stewart for the time being. Kuznetsov has pulled clear of McNamara and Stewart. And in fact, has got to within 0.8 of a second of his teammate Dylan Rudd as the white flag waves. We're on the final lap, the final 6.2 kilometre journey of Mount Panorama, the final lap of what has been an enthralling qualifying series for the Logitech G Supercar Pro Invitational.
It all comes down to this, doesn't it? It's the last lap at Bathurst, Mount Panorama, round 4 of the qualifying series for the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational for 2023. There's a lot on the line for some of these guys. People are just having a red-hot go. If they know they're safe, they're going to go for the dive and make the move. But if you're back in the pack and you need those points, you've got to think smart. You've got to think, you've got to get the job done. But man, time is running out. And look at the pressure that Stenberg's under now. There's a bowler behind him.
Well, we get some team tactics happening here. Kurt Stenberg, can he slow up Bowler and potentially allow Muggleton to make up some positions here? We know how critical it is for Josh Muggleton to finish as high as he possibly can in this race to maximise his chances of finishing in the top 20. There is Bowler right on the tail of Stenberg as they crest the top of the hill.
Yeah, and I know Bowler would probably thinking the same thing. He probably knows that he's in a TTR sandwich, so he goes, you know what, I don't want to play that game. So he's going to put as much pressure as he can on the back of Stenberg, but Stenberg doesn't want to make a mistake. We've only got just under half a lap to go.
You were spot on, Lockie. That's exactly what he's doing. You don't end up on the back of someone all the way over the top like that if you're at full pace. So there is no question. And Muggo goes to the inside.
Yeah, you don't want to make that move and then have to come unstuck. Now he's got to worry about the speed that he's lost. It's a drag race too. Stenny may lose a position here, so these guys are side by side. What's this going to do for Muggo? He's going to have a big hard toe when these guys are side by side. Have a look at them go. They're going to be here fast, furious, into this right-hander. Who's going to give it up? No one wants to throw it away because it's the last couple of corners at Mount Panorama.
Oh, no!
Oh, Muggo, he's gone again!
Oh, no. He's hit Stenny.
Oh, you are kidding me. Wow, while all of that's happening, just outside the top 10, congratulations to Dylan Rudd. Not only is he the race winner here at Bathurst, but he is also Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series champion with victories in 2 out of the 4 rounds. Rick Kuznetsov comes home in second position to make it a 1-2 finish for the 9-5 SimSport team. And Job Stewart managed to get ahead of Sean McNamara on the last lap. So Job Stewart Pursuit Sim Racing rounds out the podium. And let's just check out some replays of all of this action. What has happened in the chase? Muggleton,
he hit his teammate.
Oh,
Stenny.
Oh, no! And that's killed him.
There's a rejoin as well. There's an ugly rejoin here as well. He gets a little bit loose and gets hit by Damien Johnston. So that That's Muggo done for sure, but fortunately I think Stenny may have just got it to the line. I think there would be some serious conversations in TTR if that had led to Stenny not qualifying as well.
Yeah, can you imagine if they'd both taken each other out and both of them are sitting on the sidelines like, man, oh man, yeah, and there's that contact there at the end. Oh, man. A couple of turns to go at Bathurst, and he's definitely out. He's definitely out now.
23rd position he finished the race in, Josh Muggleton, so you're right. It was looking so good for him with just a couple of laps to go, and how it all went pear-shaped so quickly. But let's not take anything away from Dylan Rudd, because what a performance it's been for him throughout this qualifying series. He's been right amongst the lead pack in all 4 of our rounds. He's won 2 of them, and he is a very deserving qualifying series champion. And you would have to say that based on his performances throughout this qualifying series, he is going to be one of the contenders that will definitely be keeping an eye on to take the fight right up to the big guns when we go racing for the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Series.
Tell you what, that race was pretty tame for the most part, but man, oh man, you could see the tempo really kicked up a notch with those about four odd laps to go. Like, unbelievable. And who would have picked that drama at the end? That is just incredible.
It's one of those scenarios that we spoke about not knowing the point situation, but if it turns out that that whole thing didn't have to happen, that would be a really interesting conversation as well. Because Muggo, I think, was sitting 11th even before that all happened. So that may have been enough with the amount of sort of bad luck some of the other cars have had through the field. But I think now it's just an absolute no chance. There's no way he's made it in now. So be interesting to work that out and see if that all had to happen.
Well, if you remember, he was as high as 8th position at one stage, and he had that slide coming out of Forest Elbow, which cost him a couple of spots. And then he had the next incident was on the exit of Murray's Corner, which was as a result of that excursion for Dylan O'Shea. And then just to finish off his night, the big incident there at the Chase on the final lap of the race, which unfortunately involved his own teammate Kurt Stenberg, who got to the line in 16th position. So confirmation there of your final race results. Dylan Rudd for Rick Kuznetsov in a 1-2 finish for the 9-5 Sim Sport team. Job Stewart third for Pursuit Sim Racing, back to Sean McNamara and Rehan Leonage. So I'll tell you what, 9-5 Sim Sport and Pursuit Sim Racing, an excellent night for them. Their drivers locking out the top 5 positions in the race results. Adam Briggs in 6th position ahead of Brad Ratu. Andrew Dyson rounding out his consistent season in 8th position. Obviously, we get to do the number crunching to work out the final standings, but I'd be very surprised if Andrew Dyson was not inside at the top 3 in the final calculations. Robert Gibbs 9th and Dylan O'Shea rounding out the top 10 for the final race results. So, that completes the Logitech G Pro E-Series qualifying series, and I'll tell you what, if that's a bit of a preview of what's to come when the main series gets underway and we get the stars like Jake Burton and like Madison Down and all of our other superstars back into their sims, it is going to be an epic season.
No, you are not wrong. Bathurst never disappoints, does it? I mean, like I said, you know, we probably went the first half of the race. It was pretty quiet, pretty tame, but man, just as it got to the crunch end of the deal end of it, man, it really turned up a notch. And there'll be heartbreak coming away from this race, but there'll be some adulation there too. We've seen some really good driving over the last 4 weeks, and it's a sign of things to come. I think this series is going to be incredibly healthy for 2023, and I can't wait to the opening round. It's going to be absolutely magic.
It sure is. All right, let's get down to business and let's check in with not just our race winner, but our Logitech G Supercars Pro Qualifying Series champion, Dylan Rudd. Congratulations, Dylan. Another superb performance tonight. A bit of a hiccup at the Chase at one point, but you recovered very well.
Yeah, cheers, guys. Yeah, a little bit of a brain fart down at the Chase on that lap and broke a bit too deep and not hard enough, and didn't stop it in time.
Up in the commentary box, we were speculating that the reason you made that mistake could have been something to do with the fact that you'd been in second position for so long that you might have just got your braking reference points a bit out of rhythm once you got to the lead. Was that the case?
Yeah, it's probably a possibility. I haven't really had a look at it, but yeah, I know as soon as I hit the brake pedal when I got the lead there, I knew I just wasn't stopping at a time. So yeah, I'm not sure if I outbroke myself or didn't apply the brake hard enough, but yeah, it was just a bit of a brain fart moment.
From a strategy perspective, how did the race pan out for you? It looks like you were saving fuel early, but after that last safety car restart, you had the pace to pull away from everybody else.
Yeah, so in the middle stint, after those, had a couple mistakes after once I went off, so I knew I was gonna try and undercut, so which ended up working better than I anticipated it for it to work. And then yeah, after the safety car, just went flat out, see what I could do, and yeah, car was mega, car was hooked up and had good pace.
Like I said, comfortable series winner for the qualifying A series, winning 2 out of the 4 rounds. How excited are you to now take on the main game?
Oh yeah, pretty excited. So just looking to build on what I did last year. So a few top 10 results last season, so looking to do a bit more of that again this season.
Good stuff. Jake and Steve, any questions for Dylan there?
Yeah, I'm interested to find his mindset. Like, now that you've got this behind you, do you start prepping for the season that's ahead for you? Does that start now?
Yeah, once I'll have a look at the calendar, see what the first round is. We'll kick into some practice and yeah, get underway with the first couple of rounds.
I also, I just wanted to ask you, Dylan, obviously 9.5 seems to have come a really long way, and especially the last 12 months, but even, in this qualifying series, I noticed you guys made some additions, someone I had the pleasure of working with in Griffin as well. What's sort of the mindset been like, with the team growing and having all these guys to work with over the last few months?
Yeah, it's been really good. Just everyone is sharing the data, everyone has bit of what they like with the setup, so it's been really good. Griffin's been really helpful in spotting these couple of rounds in the qualifying series, so yeah, I'm very keen to work with him once the series kicks off. And yeah, it's been really, really good.
Awesome, mate. Well, awesome job this season. And anyone you'd like to thank before we let you go?
Yeah, cheers. I'd like to thank all the guys on the team, all the work they do. Really good working with everyone, and our sponsors, Racecraft Simulations, Turn and Race Apparel, RSW Graphics, Racing Ears Custom Ear Protection, Cutting Edge Tracks, and RB Media.
Really well done, Dylan. Congratulations on a fantastic evening, and congratulations on a sensational qualifying series. You are the qualifying series champion. We'll let you go and celebrate with your team and turn your attention ahead to the main game. Also, jumping into the commentary box for an interview, coming home in second place tonight in a 1-2 finish for the 9.5 Sim Sport team, Rick Kuznetsov. Congratulations, Rick. Another great night for you to round out a very consistent performance in the qualifying series.
Yeah, it was a mega team result for everyone. Finally able to get a podium, which was nice. I feel like I've always missed out the podium with strategy or unlucky in the race, but I was really happy with the result tonight.
You're involved in some pretty hard battles tonight, and obviously with your teammates both in the thick of the action as well, there was a lot to think about with strategy, but also making sure that you gave each other plenty of room on the track. How did the race pan out from your perspective?
Yeah, it was just about keeping it clean and staying off the walls. I knew Dylan had mega pace, so I was trying to stick with him the whole race. After the last safety car, he was pretty quick off the gate, but I was able to close in a little bit in the end, which was nice.
So I've got Steve Sandman Clark and Jake Burton here as well. Guys, any questions for Rick?
I was going to say, Rick, it's nice always. Well, Jake and I were talking in the commentary box about when you're in the dying stages of a race and you've got teammates around you, it takes that bit of pressure off. That would have been nice in the closing stages of this race.
Yeah, 100%. You have a lot more trust in them without making big dive bombs. So, yeah, it was a pretty good experience with 1, 2, 3 to the last lap, which was a bit sad to see.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, Rick. Obviously, you were one of the guys in this qualifying series who competed in the Supercars E Series just recently, and you actually had, if I remember correctly, some really good results in a couple of the rounds. Sort of, what's your approach or goals for this season? Like, obviously, you know, qualifying for this was probably a nice place to start, but when you're looking at the upcoming Logitech Pro Invitational, is it sort of, do I want to be winning races, or do I just want to finish in the top 20? Do I want to be consistently in the top 5? Do I want to win the championship? What's the mindset?
I think the main thing will be winning championship, but I think it's going to be a while till I do that. So I think any podiums or top 5s next season will be mega.
Really, really good job there, Rick. Before we let you go, who would you like to thank for who gets it done for you?
Racecraft Simulations, Tony Ray's Apparel, RSW Graphics, Racing Ears, Cutting Edge Tracks, and RB Media.
Awesome stuff, Rick. We will let you go and join your teammate Dylan Rudd in celebrations for the evening. There he is, Rick Kuznetsov, second place tonight for the 9.5 Sim Sport team, and coming home in third place for Pursuit Sim Racing, Job Stewart, who managed to sneak onto the podium on the final lap of the race. Job, talk us through that last lap battle there with Sean McNamara.
Yeah, that was pretty crazy. After that last pit stop, I knew I had a little bit of work to do because I lost a position just due to a bit of a bad strategy call by me. But yeah, it was pretty hectic on that last lap. I was pushing him pretty hard, you know, for that whole last stint, and then yeah, just got lucky at the chase when he blocked a little bit and went slightly too deep and just ran wide, and yeah, just snuck through.
Yeah, we're actually just watching a replay of it now on the coverage, so it was some pretty heads-up driving from yourself because you're able to force Sean into a mistake and fire it down the inside. Now, we haven't seen you in the field for the full qualifying series, so I'm not sure where that leaves you in terms of competing in the main game, but how much fun did you have tonight?
Oh yeah, it was heaps of fun. I think I was 34th coming into this race, so I don't really think I've got any chance of making it to the main game on points. But yeah, it was super fun tonight, and even the first race I did at Phillip Island. Yeah, it's just great fun racing these guys and working towards something which is the main series. Yeah, it's just great fun racing against everyone in the series, and everyone always races clean. So yeah, it's great fun.
Give us a bit of a sense of your plans for season 2023. I know that obviously you've got a very promising real-life racing career with some great results in the Toyota 86 series. What are your plans for this season in both the virtual and real-life worlds?
Yeah, this year in the virtual world, I'll try and do as many V8 Sculpts races as I can. And also, if I manage to make my way into the Logitech series somehow, I'll try and do as many of those as I can. If I don't clash with my real life racing in Super 3, which I'm doing this season with Image Racing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, you know, racing sim and real life this year. There's a fair bit of racing lined up, so I'll try and do as much as I can.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing how you go in the Super 3 series. It's a great opportunity for you. We've got Steve Sandman Clark, Jake Burton here in the commentary box as well. Gentlemen, any questions for young Job?
I was going to say just how chuffed he'd be with the results, like regardless of not making the cut as far as the inside the top 20, but to prove your worth and run as well as you did tonight, it's a lot to be proud of.
Yeah, I am super proud of myself, and yeah, just cutting a few laps with the guys in the team, trying to help them as well make the championship. Yeah, it's just been a great past few days with the team, and yeah, great fun racing, and I'm pretty chuffed with myself to come home with a podium in the final round.
Bit of a left field question that might not make a lot of sense to anyone but Job and me, but a little bit of a fun tidbit. But when I stopped racing in the Toyota 86 Racing Series, Job actually bought my car, and I believe basically my question is, what now? You're moving on to Super 3, mate. Where is it? Are you selling it? Are you getting rid of it? Someone else got it already?
Yeah, I sold the Toyota late last year to a young bloke called Cruz Frost from Adelaide. So yeah, sold the car just to help, you know, the finance towards Super 3. So yeah, hopefully he's, you know, going to go well in the car this year. I think he's going to race the full series. So he's been doing a few test days in the car, and yeah, I hope it finds its way to the front.
Unlucky, Jake, you can't buy it back, mate. It's already accounted for.
if I could afford to, I would consider it. But nonetheless, Joe as well is thinking, and obviously the rule last season was that any co-drivers for the Enduros had to be someone who wasn't competing full-time in the series. So I imagine that over at Pursuit, you'll be pretty hot property for the Enduros. Are you considering having a run in that?
Yeah, for sure. I'll consider having a run. It was great racing with Andrew last year. I think we had a few good results at Sandown and Bathurst last year. So if he does the full series again, I'd be sure to try and race with him again. Or anyone else who's in the team in the championship, I'll have a crack if I can.
Awesome stuff. No, it's been great to see you back in the field, Joe. Obviously, you are one of the up-and-coming young talents of both real life and virtual racing. Or virtual racing, you've actually been a front runner for quite a while, so it's been good to see you back in the field tonight. People that you'd like to thank, Joe?
Yeah, just thanks to all the guys at Pursuit Sim Racing for all their hard work on the setups and practice during the week. And just thanks to their sponsors, V&M Simulation and also Sideways Photography.
Well done, Job. Congratulations. Great to see you as part of the field tonight. Well, Jake, Sandman, that is a wrap for the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series. That's just the warm-up. Now we get set for the real thing. Obviously, Jake, you will not be joining us in the commentary box because you will be back behind the wheel of your sim rig, and we look forward to seeing you out on the track. But Sandman, how excited are you about what's to come?
Mate, if this is just a teaser, isn't it? Basically, the last 4 weeks have just given us a bit of an insight to what we've got to look forward to for 2023. Some new drivers, some new teams, and so much to look forward to. We're in for an absolute cracking season. Thanks for your help, Lockie. It's been great to have you in the commentary box, as well as you, Jake. It's been great to have your insight, and I can't wait to kick off the new season, the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational for 2023. It's going to be an absolute wrap.
Jake, how excited are you to be competing in it again?
Yeah, last season was great. I had a bunch of fun. That first round was phenomenal. So I'm hoping we get to see something like that again. But you never know. There's a chance that race could have been the last Logitech race that we see in a Gen 2 supercar as well. You never know what's coming. You never know what's going to happen. But really, really excited to see what happens. But I believe we have a pretty important man to our series standing by.
He is. Brenton, how are you, mate?
Well, not that important. No, the stars of the shows, apart from the drivers, are you guys and Jake Blackall, of course. What a cracking series, though. So when we started discussing how we're going to get the next 25 pro drivers in to race against guys like Jake Burton, we thought this is how we're going to do it, and it's actually exceeded our expectations. Having new cars, new teams, new drivers battling up the front was really refreshing, and they all competed in the spirit of it. And the amount of practice servers that are up during the week to get these guys, the best opportunity they can to get in the Pro Series, they're busting their guts just to get into the main game. It's been a big success for us, and we're looking forward to round one late next month. So the calendar's done. It was done in November, but we're just waiting for Supercars to think about their E-Series. But no, just a big thanks to everybody, that's all.
Yeah, and I think just as obviously the fly-in, fly-out commentator that I've been for a couple of rounds for this qualifying series, I think just as an observer, my observations on this series, just the level of professionalism with the way things are organised, not just with the broadcast, but with the communication via the website and the social media. The fact that the points and the results are updated so promptly after the race is finished, the fact that there's a media release that goes out very quickly after each race with a full wrap of everything that happened. It's brought a new level of professionalism to sim racing, which has been really, really encouraging to see. So can't wait to see how the main game series goes.
Yeah, that's off the work of Brenton Hobson and his team that do the marketing, Tom Freeman, Matty Bowler. They work really well together, producing good content quickly. And then you've got someone like John Van Ree, who's actually flying back from Adelaide to Albury tonight and is probably doing the results as we speak in a airport at Sydney Airport or something like that on his laptop. No, he literally probably will be. And the stewards, these guys put their time in every week, and cop a little bit for it. But yeah, the fact that so many people are so interested, I'm just being bombed with PMs going, what position am I overall? So I don't know, we don't know, but soon we will, and we're looking forward to sending the invites out to certainly the 20 drivers that work their way into the field and deserve their spot, and then there's an amount of other drivers who are going to get exemptions for one reason or the other. But looking forward to round 1 of the Logitech Pro Series, and roll on, just keep rolling on 2023.
Yeah, here it's going to be really, really good. And like we've all said, can't wait for it to get started. Make sure that you stay tuned to the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational website and Facebook page for the final confirmation of the drivers who finished in the top 20 in the qualifying series, who have therefore earned themselves a spot in the Supercars Pro Invitational League Series, and also obviously confirmation of that series calendar when it does get finalised. Big thanks as always to the broadcast team. I've been joined in the commentary box this evening by Steve Sandman Clark, and it's also been fantastic to have Jake Burton lending his expert comments as well. Luke Lucas, the director behind the scenes at Race Stars TV, doing an excellent job with the broadcast as always. Big thank you to everybody who's tuned in, and congratulations to all of the drivers for putting on a great show for us all. Hope you've enjoyed watching all of the action from the Logitech G Supercars Pro Invitational Qualifying Series. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Lockie Mansell. Bye for now.